Okay, so
Yeah.
I counted, it's our 8th meeting.
Okay, great.
So we're here for our 8th negotiations meeting. We have a full agenda today, but today we'll focus on issues that were noticed by the association. And we've got several administrators ready to present and sort of respond to questions and issues that were raised in various issue statements presented by the association. Stephanie, we did sort of an introduction of these issue statements at a prior meeting that you weren't able to attend. And we didn't get very far in them because we didn't have a facilitator. And so they may need to be fleshed out a little bit more, but ultimately I think we're ready to start presenting information and sort of
I'd like
having a
to
discussion.
first, with that, just kind of go back to the one on our agenda that we're starting with is issue statement number 6.
Yeah.
And just really make sure that the statement or the question is, you know, what we wanted to say and.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want to read
And then maybe
that
even narrow the focus on some of what we discussed last time, or 2 times ago, and then have some of the people kind of present. So, I don't know, can you? Thanks.
So is there a how do we?
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting, there is currently, but I kind of wanted to change it a little bit,
Okay.
to maybe be better. Now that I'm looking at it, it says, how do we attract and retain staff? And one of there's lots of different staff. And one part of the stuff that we brought up last time dealt specifically with SPED teachers. And so kind of thought of another way to phrase it would be, how do we ensure the work-life balance of SPED teachers in light of staffing challenges? But I know that we had other things in there that weren't just special education. So I don't know if we want to say teachers instead of SPED. But it also has to do with attracting and retaining, because that would help with what I mean is staffing challenges, as in like when we have when we have open positions. So
attract and retain is probably too broad,
okay. I mean,
I'm guessing. I think that.
I don't know, maybe, yeah.
Well, attract and retain could be everything from sign-on bonuses to salary to.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So if this is not necessarily an economic statement, unless some of your solutions do have a.
I mean,
cost.
I don't want to limit
We
the
wouldn't want to limit
solutions,
it,
but
right.
like,
But you didn't assume that the focus was going to be about that, did
I
you?
did not.
Okay, so it
I mean,
sounds like you're
personally.
going to talk about workload, if you will. I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of I don't know if that's a technical
Yeah.
way to say it.
And we have an MOU from last year that did talk about this, because this was something that was brought up in an issue statement from last year. So that is something else on our,
So is it workload and work-life balance is an interest?
yes.
So how do we create a more manageable workload?
Yeah.
One of your interests is
Or
probably a work-life balance.
there's some practices that were put in place this year that we want to continue,
Okay.
because the MOU is for 1 year.
How do we continue to support manageable workloads?
Sure.
And then you can always go back and adjust that as a group if you get deeper into this and you think that's not really it. I think that's a good place to start, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not to downplay work-life balance, but I'm guessing that's going to be an interest in several things within that.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we continue to support manageable workload?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you say you had folks that wanted to frame and focus that more? Did you want to kind of summarize?
We
what you-
attempted to frame, and I shouldn't say attempted, we framed and focused, but there were definitely some things that were stuck out as solutions. And so I don't know that we have to completely frame and focus again, but we can show you what's up there now,
Okay.
some of the things that we said. It would be good, and that's why we have some staff here to
Be responsive
share
to it,
some-
okay.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the first things we discussed was how in our MOU, there was discussion of the 4 paperwork days that special education staff are given this year, and how much those have been helpful, and we want to ensure them forever. So I don't know how else to say it. I was going to say forever, but in future years, for the foreseeable future. It's a great way to assist with the workload, the manageable workload for special education staff, since their workload was defined differently than the general education teachers. The general education teachers, for secondary, we had them teaching 5 out of 7 classes, but we are not doing that for special education staff. So one thing that we did to help with that was 4 paperwork days. So
is it okay that I
like to
just,
see that.
while we're not going to jump to solutions, since I am starting the 5-step doc,
Sure, please
I'm
do.
just going to put one idea,
One
is to
idea.
continue the protected paperwork days.
Correct. I've heard nothing but great things. So, and I think other people have as well.
Are these in the right areas? Are these solutions rather than,
I think they are on here, they're not in the right areas. On my document, you know how sometimes if a solution comes up early, we won't shift to solutions, but I'll capture it. So I just captured that as one.
Do we want
So should we
you
take
to
it off
share then?
I think if you can continue to explain what you've already framed and focused, and I'll try to capture in this document where it goes, then we'll screen share.
Okay.
Did you all get to interest?
We
we find
would
some
like
in
your
here, we'll drop
assistance
it under,
in, yes, thank you.
Okay.
So
Does
have
that
you
make
written
sense,
something in
Mike?
interest?
Do you think that makes sense, that we kind of sorted on my document as she shares, and then I'll share it when things are in the right place, so we can,
I think for consistency, if we identify these things as solutions, they should be removed from interests.
And from the focus, you mean? Because this
From the
that's-
focus.
and drop them down to the bottom of your document. I'm putting them at the bottom of mine.
Okay.
Under step
Yeah.
4, possible ideas.
Do we want to delete or cross through, or how do you want to?
Can you cut and copy them down there?
Yeah, you want to cut and copy? Perfect. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. I know, it's awesome. Excuse me. Sorry.
And if you do that, we may just use your document, but I'll get something going here as well.
Yeah.
I think the visual is helpful.
Again, a solution, one thing that was in the MOU was about having secondary principals, when possible, assigning SPED staff to 5 classes, but I know that this year was a huge challenge, and so something else that they did was I believe, did not assign SPED staff at the secondary level a seminar. So again, that's another solution that was
Possible
happening
solution.
currently. Yeah,
So that was an explanation under frame and focus. I'm guessing that one possible idea is to continue it, so you can also copy that down below.
yeah.
Again, it doesn't mean we have consensus on these ideas. It means they go under ideas, not facts, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that was seminar day?
Yep. Maybe specifically special, yeah.
I guess I have a question regarding that. Do we know how many, or how do most, like secondary schools, do they do subject for their SPED classes, or do they go off a team?
Middle school, it depends. So Westridge just went from all core, because SPED was in all the core class, we rotated with everyone per team. And then last year, they switched to departments. And then at the high school, it's departments. So,
From what I understand, the high school SPED staff are teaching 6 classes.
yes,
Right. And then have a plan.
yes.
But for middle, I know that there are still middle schools where the SPED staff have 5 classes and then have a plan and then
A
work with
supervisor or
the
something like that.
yeah, supervision. But I don't know if that's going to continue.
Well, and I think we should follow the process and identify our focus before
Yeah.
we have any questions.
Okay. Absolutely. So again, I think that's, what's up there is,
On the question marks you
Yeah.
have, how's workload defined, number of students, number of minutes, was that where you said the district has some responses to some of the, okay.
yeah.
So we'll hear some of that. What's SLP caseloads? How was that part of a frame of focus?
I'm curious about the numbers. I want to know, it's kind of similar to elementary and secondary caseload numbers. How do you assign them, or how many are there, per person? What's the lowest number in a caseload, the highest number?
And you're cut and copying the possible solution of a SPED stipend down to a possible idea.
Right.
And that's where I put it in mine, under an idea.
I would take that off. So maybe a focus could be, the question is, for right here, what does it look like for middle and high school currently? And then,
When you guys talked about a SPED stipend, that's kind of really a solution, but did you frame and focus number of vacancies, turnover, anything like that? Is there data to be had on that in order to?
I mean, yes, I think I'm sure there is data on how many vacancies and,
In other words, it sounds like a solution, but do we know it's a problem?
right, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Question about what's the process if there is an open position in a building? So say if there was an open position for a SPED staff member, how do they then divvy up the workload? He's having internet issues. How is the workload changed if you have an opening? How
So it's the how does it
addressed?
currently work?
Sure.
Question, okay.
Yeah.
And we'll hear some of that today.
Yep.
I got my screen up
Oh, thank you.
for us to.
So really, these first four are all about something that Sherry Dumoulin would share with us.
Okay.
I believe this part, we talked through it, and I think that it talks about secondary general education teachers and how many preps they have with different departments. I think that is something that you can discuss, have the staff member discuss with the principal, sit down, come to something that would work for their workload. It's a small number of staff that would have up to 5 preps in, 2 different departments. So we kind of talked about how that's a small number of staff. So, because we're going back over the things that we brought up 2 days ago.
You did explain how it's a problem, though?
We explained, we talked about how having 5 different preps, 4 of them being, in a language class and 1 being in a social studies class, makes it difficult to plan, and PLC with those groups.
Okay.
But,
I think a lot of
The idea
those,
of a possible.
I think a lot of those
guidance
concerns were just really centered around the unique situations with singleton languages, which are 3
Yep.
or 4 in each high school.
doc. Okay. And one idea it looks like came up that wouldn't belong there, it'd belong under possible ideas, is
Yep.
the guiding document for principals.
yes.
Okay. I moved it down under
Okay,
idea, if you
Yeah.
guys want to do the same.
thank you. Let's take this part. Well, sorry. I feel like it should still be here as something that we. Another part of workload was PE, library, music, and art, having kind of an equity with their FTE. And I know that Dr. Schumacher explained that there was some inconsistency with number of sections in different buildings, and that you were going to report on, or Pam Lewis was going to report on trying to achieve consistency.
Yeah, that was a question at the elementary level, correct?
Yes, sorry, elementary, thank you.
And that, we're going to hear back on that tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, there you go, thanks.
Because you've used the phrase equity and you've used consistency. You haven't said equality, but did you guys unpack equity really means equity?
We didn't. This kind of came from, if there's a building that has a PE teacher who's 1.0, but the music teacher is 0.8? Why is that? Why aren't they all the same? Or,
So maybe
I
after
don't
the
know,
report
the number-
tonight, we could understand.
Kind of look at the number of sections,
Okay.
yeah. Look
Okay.
at number of sections, how many sections in the elementary
Okay.
makes it a full-time position for those specialists.
Okay. So that more information tonight will probably help frame and focus that better. What else you got?
This one actually, where we can take out, we're working on that
Under-
with a different issue statement.
Okay.
And then, I don't want to, let's phrase this better. Instructional coaches have been asked, or, I don't know. The question is, what's the expectation of instructional coaches outside of their contract day in excess of like a 187-day contract? And we talked about Dr. Gonzer sharing some stuff with regards to instructional coaches and expectations and that kind of thing. So again, there's parts in there that, like, again, are solution-oriented that should be moved. As you can see, I like having you here for consistency and helping us go through the process, making sure that we're focusing it in the
Yeah.
proper way. And
I'm curious, your issue statements usually don't come forward embedded with solutions. I'm just curious, were you guys just on a roll when you were together?
Well, because we didn't, during that meeting, we were going to talk about late resignations, and then we didn't. We started talking about a few of our issues, and I think we kind of just started looking at the things that we've heard were issues and bringing up solutions.
Yeah, no, I'd say what you guys have typically done is I think sometimes you do have ideas on solutions. You just don't put them on the forum. You don't do them until we invite everyone.
Right.
And I will just give sort of a word of caution, if solutions are embedded throughout, people can't help but start feeling like they're being forced to consider solutions instead of being invited to help
Right.
solve or come up with solutions. And it just makes the atmosphere a little different.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I usually don't see that from you guys. So if you kind of just got on a roll, you got on a roll. But I don't think it's too late to sort it back out. What I want to make sure of is that we have the creativity in this room and that you have frame and focused enough that other solutions could be put up there,
Sure,
right? So,
sure.
okay.
For the last bullet, I would ask, instead of compensation covering during plan time, the question would be, how is their plan time scheduled?
Protecting their,
Yeah,
protecting their plan time, or ensuring that they get their plan time every day.
Right, because is the solution to provide compensation as your solution is to make them feel better about losing it, or is your solution to take the, descent the district from, or to try to get the district to, what are you trying to solve there?
right. I'm trying to solve the feeling that they might be asked to substitute during a planned time, but not be afforded a similar, I don't want to say compensation, but that's what it is. Counselors and social workers, they don't necessarily, I think, have like a carved out time in
Okay.
their schedule because they need to be flexible, they got to be available for kids, got to be ready to, in a moment's notice, a lot of times,
So
right, to help.
Would you
So-
say that the issue is not that they're missing plan and it's impacting their ability to be effective? The issue is they're not feeling rewarded for subbing? In other
If
words,
they're
do
ever-
they-
yeah.
do they want you to struggle to try to make sure their plan time's given, or do they want to ensure that if we don't have plan time and we sub, there should be an acknowledgement?
I think so.
'Cause those are real two
Yeah,
different things.
They are. I think it would be difficult to say either. I think both are important.
Okay. If people have questions about that, we should ask more.
Yeah,
I don't know,
we should ask
our
more.
guests are going to report, I don't know if they want to report more, and then we'll come back and dig more on these areas where we might need to dig deeper, like here.
I would just say, I think we need to do more work on the focus area to make sure we understand what we're focusing on. Are you sure?
Yeah, I just feel like it's going to be hard to come up with solutions if we don't really unpack that one particularly. I don't,
Sure.
because it does come across more as like just a proposal. So to hear more, what social workers and counselors are saying, feeling, thinking, might help everybody to get their head into
Sure.
what the problem seems to be. And then other areas of frame and focus, I think anyone can say, what other information do you want? I didn't have the benefit of hearing everything the last couple meetings on this, so I don't want to ask people to be repetitive, but if you were here and some information didn't get unpacked, we can either do that now, or we can do it after we have presenters, whatever order you all think
Sure.
makes sense.
I think it'd be good for that last one to find out, are they being asked to substitute? I think that's probably the underlying part of it. Are they being asked during the day to fill in when we're short on a sub, and how that impacts anything that they have to do afterwards? So that
Is
would
it
be
more
information we would
exploratory?
need to
How do we understand the frequency and impact on
Sure.
subbing? And so maybe that's more
On their workload.
preliminary research together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want to jump to interest yet, because I think interest might be more or different once we frame and focus better.
Yeah.
I see you've got some up here, but I think we should look at those here in a little bit and then see what other interest. But what do you guys think in terms of how you want to go? Do you want to continue sort of asking the questions based on everything Jill's presented so far? Do you want to hear from the folks that are here to report and then continue to frame and focus? Whatever you want to do.
Just, I said this at the last time, so I'll say it again just for your sake. These two, this one and the next one, do feel different to me, in that there seems to be just a lot of solutions put into the focus area. And so I asked us to stop last time. So again, I'm not certain. If everyone else is, I say we pull forward, but if everyone else is certain what our focus is, I'm good, but are we certain
Sure.
what the focus is?
I would say the focus is about the work-life balance and the manageable workloads. And I don't know how, when you have so many different types of employees, you can make a super narrow focus, I guess. But I mean, the focus is, the underlying thing is making sure we have a manageable workload.
Well, is there more than one issue statement here?
Could be.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I feel like are the bottom ones more economic?
Yeah, I mean, they could be, yeah. But again, I think we need to, like you said, it's preliminary and find out how much of an issue is
Maybe we just start unpacking
this.
the SPED issue? Because
Yeah.
you've got folks here that can report on that. Let's just start unpacking that, hearing the report, continue to frame and focus, identify the interest as it relates to SPED, brainstorm as it relates to SPED.
Sure,
And then maybe the others break away into different issue statements.
okay.
We can keep them on one document for now, but does that sound okay? Do we have folks here that are prepared to share information?
Yeah, I would like to hear from them.
Okay, sounds good.
Can I ask a process question for the association?
Yeah.
I think it might help us to understand a little bit about how we best go about this. I'm guessing, and let me know if I'm wrong, that when you guys do your work to identify your issues for the upcoming negotiations, that you survey your members, talk to your members, do a bunch of information gathering, and you probably had people come forward and say, well, for my specific position, this is an issue, this is an issue, this is an issue. And then it all fell under this workload issue. I would assume that for some of this, it's informational, right? So these concerns exist, people in these positions have these questions, and we can do a lot with having this conversation in a public meeting and sharing information about, how these decisions are made, how assignments are given. And maybe that can be part of this, is just making sure that in our statement that we put out and any MOUs or anything that we do, that people who have these concerns get them addressed in this sort of format or setting.
Yeah.
So whether you do something different or new with any of these going forward or not, this is probably, you're saying just provide clarity.
Yeah, I'm
it
just
sounds like
putting
clarity
myself
needs
in
to be-
Jill's shoes, and I assume a challenge of her position is that we do have, professional employees encompasses a lot of people, and I'm sure you need to not let anyone fall through the cracks or not make a certain group feel like their concerns weren't heard during a negotiation session. And so I think we can do a lot with making sure that every individual who falls under that umbrella knows that their concerns were heard, talked about, and information is given out about, is the administration aware of that concern? And if so, what are they doing to address it, and what will next school year look like?
Yeah.
A question, the MOU you all said you have that already existed on workloads, is that specific to SPED?
SPED and secondary gen ed.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I just changed the issue statement to how do we continue to support manageable workloads for SPED and secondary gen ed.
Okay,
There's more in there, but I don't think it's the same issue statement.
sure.
So it sounds like then we've got some folks that are reporting back on SPED information that this group wanted, and perhaps gen ed info.
We're ready for Sherry?
Will you say that one more time so I can put it?
I did, how do we continue to support manageable workloads for SPED and secondary gen ed?
Okay.
You have to turn on the button.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
You mean just dive in? Is it not on?
It has to be in your face.
Oh, all right.
Pointed directly
All
at
right,
you.
awesome.
And Sherry, I kind of just facilitate, just direct your report to everybody here in the room. They're really the decision makers.
Okay, perfect. So I do want to share with you one of the pieces of information that was just on the screen. I did not receive it prior, so I don't have specific, the SLP caseloads. I'm working to get that, and I'm hoping that I can get that while I'm here, but that wasn't one of the pieces of information that I had received in preparation for today. So I apologize in advance, but do I just go through my list then? Is that how you want me to do it? All right. So I'm going to actually start backwards, right? Because one of the pieces in the final request was inquiring about the paperwork days and the longevity of those paperwork days, right? And so one of the pieces that I wanted to share with the group is that that paperwork day was to tackle a couple of pieces. One, we heard loud and clear, the ability for staff to be able to carve away time during plan time and have that uninterrupted time to be able to dedicate towards those paperwork requirements was challenging, and so we created that opportunity for staff. It was also in conjunction with, we would see a reduction in errors or staff not completing paperwork, right? And so while staff have indicated appreciation, we have not yet seen a reduction in either not completing paperwork or errors in paperwork. So I wanted just to set the stage with that. However, we are planning to continue. I actually budgeted for our staff to have paperwork days, even though with the sunset of ESSER dollars. So that is something that we are planning. We have structured things a little bit differently in terms of if we've identified individuals requiring maybe some specific support to navigate or understand some of those paperwork elements. We've been pairing them with a partner, if you will, or kind of scripting out maybe some more definitive to-dos for individuals. So that covers the paperwork piece. Any, I don't know, questions, or I don't know if there are questions? Is there?
Can you say again, you were budgeting to continue it, but then you also have maybe something that you're going to share with staff with like maybe expectations of the paperwork day?
So if individuals have demonstrated difficulty in completing paperwork or having a high volume of errors, we have maybe paired individuals with a buddy to offer a level of support.
Okay.
And that's just on an individual by individual basis, nothing widespread, if that makes sense.
Is that, you shared that in looking at the data, those paperwork days, we hadn't seen a measurable difference in incomplete paperwork or errors. Is that what we're doing in response to that, is to try and really get at that goal, is to start the buddy system? Okay.
In addition to honing in on specific training for next school year, we began mapping out some explicit training. We started that, but it was optional this past school year during the instructional fair. And so we're going to look to add some required elements during district professional development time or potentially pulling people out of buildings. So a couple of different ways.
I love that from a risk management perspective.
So you were saying that you guys, you were hoping that you would reach achieve a goal of seeing less errors in paperwork and also seeing them completed on time? Okay. I also wonder if a goal could have been that the staff that were doing all of this were able to work on it less at home. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that was the premise, right?
Right.
Because staff didn't have the allocated time during the day.
Sure.
For consecutive amounts of time, right?
Right.
So because of that time constraint, that's where this triggered in.
Okay.
But when you can dedicate to it, you would presume that you would see a decline in errors and.
Lack of
Or
completion.
lack of completion.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions about paperwork?
This might be hard to answer because every paperwork situation is different, but about how long does it take to complete on average? I know you're laughing, especially over there. Is there an about? Okay,
There really
yeah.
is. Because honestly, some individuals they have some kind of systems and routines in place
Right.
and they can get through it pretty quickly. Other individuals, it's a little more complex. And then also the nature and the need of the student
That's-
also
yeah.
drives the complexity of the IEP itself. So sorry,
Perfect.
I can't really answer
No, I
that.
kind of figured, but I felt like I should still ask, so you're good.
But if you would like to become a special education teacher, I can walk you through it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Sherry, you said, and I just wanted to clarify, so the cost associated with those 4 paperwork days is now a part of the special education budget
At this time.
as opposed to being pulled out of ESSER funds?
At this time, I reworked the special education budget to ensure that we could accommodate
Okay.
the paperwork days moving into the next school year.
And the cost associated with that is providing coverage? Substitute coverage,
Mhm.
okay.
So for individuals who would require a substitute.
Okay.
Do you have a cost number with that?
I can give you a ballpark, but I didn't bring the exact amount. But do you want me to give you a ballpark, or do you want me to get the exact amount and bring it back to you?
A ballpark would start.
About, I want to say around 144,000.
Okay.
And that's for 4 paperwork days per SPED employee.
Certified.
Certified. Sorry, thank you.
So for certified special education employees who would require a substitute, right? So that's the other
Got it.
layer, right? Well, let me back up a second. Any certified special education employee is eligible for the 4 paperwork days. The caveat is we don't have substitutes for all positions under the special education umbrella.
Right.
And so the substitute costs come into those who would, who we would have substitutes
For.
available for.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the other piece, so just diving into caseloads. So the question that I had received were kind of give an overview of this year and past school years. So those of you who know anything about special education, we like our data. So what I can do is I can tell you, I can actually tell you average caseloads per year since I've been the director. So going back to 1920, and I'll start at the elementary. Our average caseload at the elementary level was 14.3 to 22.8 caseload size. 2021, I do want to remind people that, in case you forgot, we had a pandemic in the middle of all of this. So 2021, average caseload sizes for elementary, 13.7 to 18.2. 21-22, 8.5 to 15.3. 22-23, 8 to 14, and then 23-24, it's projected to be 8 to 14.4 are the average caseload sizes for elementary. So I'm gonna just do outlier situations because that was it was kind of a lots of layers of questions, I think, with each category. So I just felt like I would do outliers within each of the levels, if that's fine.
Yeah.
So one of the questions was in regards to outliers for highest and lowest caseloads. And so in locations that we had determined, so for example, we have one location that still maintains a singular staff member because of the numbers at that elementary school. We have actually rerouted where some private and parochial students would be served to work to increase that caseload. So that essentially reduces some from one location and then moves it to another location. The other piece is that the other question specifically about elementary is highest caseloads. So we found ourselves in a situation to where we had an influx of move-in students in a particular location. So we did add substitute availability. So there was additional support within that location over the course of the school year. Sometimes we find ourselves in a situation to where we have to move a staff member because maybe numbers aren't warranted in one location for that allocation. And so we have had to do some movement. It has been less at elementary, but we have had to make some small adjustments like that. And then the other question as it related to elementary was, how do we manage when there is an open position? And so honestly, it really kind of depends on the nature and the need of the location. We've done anything from, we have contracted with an agency and had a contract special education staff member come in. We have added a long-term sub through Kelly Services. We've had support from instructional specialists. Sometimes we have had to divvy that caseload depending on who we were able to obtain. We've had to divvy that caseload amongst existing individuals. And if that's been the case, then we've increased their paperwork days. So instead of the 4, then maybe they've gotten 5 or 6. It also depends on the number of IUPs or when those IUPs would fall, et cetera. Yeah, so any questions about elementary before I move to middle school?
Go ahead.
Are you going to have comps of other districts?
Oh, I do. Thank
Okay.
you. Sorry, I forgot to click that tab. So I have a couple of different tabs. I can tell you Blue Valley elementary caseloads, I don't have, I can't go back to 1920, so sorry about that. I can only do most current for other districts, but Blue Valley ranges at the elementary level 10.5 to 12.5 for their elementary caseload. And I closed my tab with Olathe, I'm sorry. But it was around that 12 to 15 range. I can get that exact number, I just have one too many tabs open, maybe.
When you give us the ranges, is that the low and the high?
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
So the other piece that I want to ensure, because somebody had said this earlier, right? Right now I'm talking resource caseloads, right? There's a number of different entities and umbrellas under special education. So these are our resource caseloads. So that was the place I thought that was probably the easiest to start.
Yeah. And when you've had an open position and you've added a long-term substitute, they can provide the minutes, but they can't do the paperwork? Is that no? Yes?
We work with the individual and
Okay.
then and partner with the agency, Kelly Services, to sometimes we have found ourselves in positions that it's probably not in the best interest of the individual to put them in that position, and then other times they have taken on those pieces.
Okay.
With support, not
Sure.
never in isolation.
Right, okay. When you've had to divvy the caseload among other SPED staff, is that the number that they then end up having in their caseload, is that captured in these ranges you've given? Okay.
Well, no.
So that's what I was trying to ask, like, what's the highest? Meaning like, if you were supposed to have 3 SPED teachers at a school, but you had 2, and they had to split the caseload, what could that look like with numbers and?
So, I mean, just from a simple math perspective, if they're, let's say that each of their caseloads were 10 and they only had 2 of the staff members, so they
Right.
have that third, so one would have 15.
15,
They would
15.
each have 15,
Okay.
right? So, so I would say something like that. The other piece that I think is tricky to be able to capture, right, and I think it leads to some of the, I don't want to say misperception, but maybe
Sure.
misinterpretation of some pieces, is that sometimes we have always allowed kind of that local level of teams being able to determine, this teacher is going to support maybe K through 3, and then this teacher is going to support, 4, 5, 6, and sometimes you have a higher number of students at K through 3, and maybe you have a lower number at that upper, that is if they
Building
divided them
decision.
equally, right, they would have,
Overlap.
they would definitely meet within that range, but sometimes, some people either really like that kindergarten level,
Right.
or they really like that 6th grade level, right? So, we have afforded them that local decision, I guess.
Okay, great.
Any other questions about elementary?
Do they usually have to ask for the additional paperwork day? Or is it just kind of like, this is happening, we would like to offer? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and honestly, every circumstance is a little bit different. Just being honest, right? Some instances, we've discovered that maybe paperwork is due next week, right? And
Right.
so we want to really wrap around and help and support. We always want to wrap around and help support, but sometimes the need is more immediate. Sometimes when the paperwork or the things aren't necessarily needed until a later time, it's not necessarily always just offered immediately, if that
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah.
On the paperwork days, are the staff working in the building, at home? Is it their choice? Where does the actual work take place?
Yeah, so we strongly recommend, we reserve a room here at the district office
Oh,
for
perfect.
staff to be
Okay.
able to come and be uninterrupted. Because I know what it was like to get the radio call or to.
That's
get
where my
text,
question was
right?
feeding
And
into,
so,
yeah.
But we don't mandate that they come out of their building.
Perfect.
It's their decision, but it has to be, I think our rule, if you will, is that it has to be on district property.
Okay, perfect.
We also encourage the bistro. People really like to work at the bistro.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I don't have any more.
Does anybody still have the frame and focus notes up? Was there anything else under frame and focus that we might want to ask about? And/or is this?
I have middle and high to go through.
When you're defining caseloads, you're defining it by number of students. I know in our MOU, there's a little line at the end, something, or not at the end, but it talks about defining it by the number of students, but also something about, maybe you can read it.
I've got it in front of me. Let's see. It's about how it's defined, and I think it's like something about the needs of those students
Yeah.
as well. And maybe it's in our new P&A language that has to do with, see if I can find it.
I just mean, because I've had staff say, why can't we define it by the number of minutes that the student is being supported by, and then make sure we have, a range of number of minutes that you're supporting as opposed to number of students, but I wanted to look at what that said there.
I think it's really hard to
Yeah.
just solely use minutes, because minutes can, I'm sure that we don't do this, but I have been in other locations to where minutes are inflated to create justification for various things. So
Okay.
I think minutes can be a hard, in isolation, I should
Okay.
say,
Sure.
right?
I know, you're trying to find the specific.
Yes, I'm trying to find it. I think I'm almost there. Okay, here we go. This is the new language in our P&A. The parties acknowledge that work assignments for special education teachers are primarily defined and measured by the number of special education students assigned to that teacher, their caseload, and are also measured by the intensity of the needs of the students assigned to a particular teacher. So, intensity.
Yeah.
And I would say that that's where you would see the decrease in caseload size for our center-based
Yeah.
caseloads in comparison to a resource caseload.
Okay.
Is this the appropriate time to ask about turnover? Or the appropriate person?
Do you know how many elementary special education teachers you hired for next school year or have hired?
I mean, I could have a spreadsheet that has that information. I'd have to look at it for a minute.
Just curious how it compares to special ed teachers.
Yeah. I mean, I can pull, do you want me to look and tell you how many we
Yeah, or we can go through the middle and high school caseload
then
numbers and then
revisit.
take a break or something and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Okay, so moving on to middle school.
Sure. Yeah.
So middle school caseloads, again, I'm going to go through our historical information. I'll hit those outlier pieces, and then we'll also share the regional caseload sizes. So 1920 for us, average caseload was 12.7. And the first couple of years are not ranges at the secondary level just because of the way, I mean, the numbers were literally within point something of each other. So 12.7 in 1920, 2021 was 11.4, 21-22, 11.5, and then 22-23, we had a stronger range of 11 to 14 on a caseload, and then 23-24, we're projected to be 9.5 to 14 is the range there. And so in terms of outliers, we did have an outlier. I would say this outlier actually was back in I think it was the year before, and then we added a staff member at that particular location. And so now, again, the numbers are pretty commensurate in all of the buildings. One building is a little bit higher, but however, their transient rate is also a very high rate. So we see a lot of people exit and a lot of people enter at various times. So it just, it makes it a little bit more difficult with that particular location. In terms of some of the other pieces at the middle school level, I think our middle schools are currently in the process of working on master schedules and things for next school year. Again, each building does those master schedules, some of them team, some of them departmentalize. And so we have been, our instructional specialist at the secondary level, and then Deb Dupree, the coordinator at the middle school level, has been working with buildings to really look at maximizing those staff. We have had, I think we have two positions that were unfilled that we did secure long-term subs. And then we have worked with those subs to, I think we may have had a gap, don't hold me to this, but I think we may have had a gap before the subs started, that we did have to rely on some internal folks to help with some pieces, but I'm pretty confident that we had provided some paperwork days. That was one of the circumstances to where things were needed sooner rather than later.
Right.
So. In terms of the surrounding area, numbers at the middle school level in Blue Valley are 12 to 15, and then in Olathe, they were 15 to 20.
So we're looking better for middle school than our.
I also had asked both Olathe and Blue Valley as it relates to, this impacts high school more than it does middle school, but I'll share it kind of with both pieces. In terms of the periods per day, right? The consult period versus like at the high school level, right? The 5 out of the 7. And the information that I received was that we were commiserate in terms of what that delivery and what that responsibility would look like.
Commiserate with the other.
Both Olathe
District.
and Blue Valley. in terms of special education teachers either having a consult or a seminar. It was determined by the principal at each high school if that staff member was able to just have kind of that consult time, or if they were going to be assigned. Like one of them even gave me an example of an interpersonal class that this individual teaches as that assignment for that consult time. So kind of like a service to the building period that's kind of used in a variety of ways. Any other questions or any other things about middle school before I go through high school information?
Great.
Okay, high school for Shawnee Mission in 1920, our average caseload size was 13.4. 2021 went down to 11.9. 21-22, 12.5. 22-23, 11 to 14.6. And then next school year projected to be 12.6 to 13.9 is that range. In terms of, well, I just mentioned the piece about the 5 out of 7 and the consult. Our guidance, if it works into the schedule and we're able to do it, we definitely encourage that consult time being built in. I know that we had some difficulty and it was inconsistent in some locations. I think some buildings chose to do a seminar time in lieu of that. And then in terms of comparable, well, let me back up. I will say outlier locations. We did have a building that had a significantly lower caseload. Actually, we had 2 buildings that had significantly lower caseloads. One of them lost a staff member for next school year. And then the other one, we actually did a split assignment for the duration of this school year because we had some unexpected departures at another location. And so this staff member is splitting time between 2 high schools. And then surrounding high school in Blue Valley, 12 to 15, and then high school in Olathe, it was 15 to 20.
I know you said that you encourage the principals to be able to schedule a consult hour for SPED staff, and maybe this is a better question for Jeremy, but it was kind of my understanding that wasn't able to be achieved at the high schools.
I think it was inconsistent. Some locations they did,
It
and then
started and they changed it in the middle of the year to.
And then other locations didn't. I will also say that we've received feedback from our staff who actually wanted it to be the seminar time in lieu of the consult. So that came from feedback from staff that I had heard. I mean.
Okay.
So I was looking at our MOU that we entered into last year, and that involved a commitment to keep caseloads at 10 to 15, looks like at all grade levels. And so if I'm looking at what Sherry just shared with us, it looks like we are projected to be in that 10 to 15 range at all levels for next school year as well.
I think the cap, yes. I think the tricky piece comes into play with the same example that I gave with elementary, is that sometimes local levels will make determinations. So for example, if we have a brand new teacher to the profession, sometimes they are really wanting to wrap around that teacher and have that teacher start with a lower caseload, which we also support that as well, right? Getting them. So that then causes others to absorb, but it builds a very strong, close-knit team and provides a high level of support. So it goes into some of those retention pieces that you kind of were talking about before. And then we also see some of those pieces at the elementary as well, with specifically at elementary, it's those grade level pieces. I think the other hard piece, the other piece that's difficult to capture, Jill, which was your follow-up about the elementary, is that is what caseloads would be when fully staffed, right? And if we find ourselves in a position that we're not, then we have been working with either agencies or Kelly Services or different mechanisms to provide that.
Right.
Couple of questions. Number one, what is it looking like for the parochial students that we're serving? Are some schools serving more parochial students? How does that play into the numbers? And then the second question is, can you talk a little bit about how the instructional coaches support the staff?
Yeah. So private and parochial services are, we like to make things complicated. So it looks a little different at each level, right? So at elementary, they are often, it's the school that is closest to the private and parochial site. And we're fortunate or unfortunate that we have some flexibility when it comes to that, right, in some locations. So we do find ourselves regularly assessing based on numbers and making adjustments. So just an example is at one point in time, since I've been here as director, we served a certain private and parochial school at Santa Fe. Then we shifted that to Highlands because the numbers just made more sense over in this location. And then now next year to Westwood View. So we watch those numbers and then make the determination as to what's going to make the most impact. We also count those numbers when we are looking at, so private and parochial students would be listed within our caseload numbers, so it's not like it's a separate entity that's not being factored in here. And we count them in our projections as well. Yeah. Does that answer your private and parochial question? At the secondary level, it is typically that student's home building that would provide those services. So if their residency building would be Trail Ridge, then we would provide those services at Trail Ridge. So, yeah. And then your second question was about the instructional coach and what role they play. I'm going to tell you what role they play outside of this school year, and then I'll talk to you about this school year, because this school year has been an anomaly, right? So outside of this school year, our instructional specialists provide a level of training to our staff. They help individually with curricular identification or problem solving through different curricular resources to utilize, helping them interpret, analyze data, helping them develop IEPs, helping them maybe with some assessment types of things, right? Maybe interpretation of a CBM or something of that nature. This school year, that has been more difficult. As many people are aware, we've had some difficulty filling para-educator positions. And so our instructional specialists and our behavioral support staff have been placed half-time in our centralized programs at 3 elementary sites. Did I cover everything? Okay.
It's 1 o'clock right now. Do you want to continue to frame and focus? Do we need 5 minutes? Do we want to give you an opportunity to look at turnover? Where do you guys want to go from here?
Maybe take a quick break, allow Sherry to look at our hire numbers for next year, and then maybe we can let her finish presenting her information so she can go about her day.
And did you by chance bring the numbers for the unified preschool?
Yeah, so they have, I can speak to that. So they have no more than 10. However, that's going to, ideally, it is 5 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. However, there have been some, again, kind of like that example that I gave about elementary earlier. There have been some individual sites where maybe they have a 5th or a 6th student get identified, and they have chosen to keep that student in the morning, so then it offsets, so they have 6 in the morning and only 4 in the afternoon, but still, it doesn't go over a total of 10. Yeah. That does not count again, because there's different, I feel like I could give a nuance in every situation, right? That does not count. That may look different if it is a speech-only student who is working on articulation. That student wouldn't necessarily be captured, right? You have to look at that a little bit differently. Is that the number you're referencing?
Yes, and then if they do go speech, then it's only the SLP doing that evaluation, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a time where more than 10 were identified between the AM and the PM and you had to adjust something?
I mean, if we did, then we would probably look at another site.
Okay.
But at this point in time, that has not become. Now, keep in mind, we've just recently expanded these unified classrooms in the last 2 years,
Okay.
but it hasn't become a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what you were saying is that if a student is identified for SLP, for services at the SLP, staff member can assist with that as opposed to the pre-K unified teacher being responsible for the paperwork and the case load. Okay.
Five minutes?
Yeah.
When we
Okay.
look at turnover, if it's possible, could we look by, elementary, middle, high? For sped turnover, if it's possible, without too much of a hassle? Just the more specific we could be.
Thanks for tapping and saying.
Time do I have?
Okay. You want to do just 5 minutes, come back at 10 after, no later than a quarter after? Yep. Okay.
Yes, so I couldn't do it. So there was too much information, so I do apologize. I can give you some overall numbers, but I can't separate it out, like in that short of time.
Yeah.
So I can work with HR and we can get you a breakdown of those numbers. What I can tell you is that last year, at this time, so we hired a total of 59 new special education staff. Now, keep in mind that encompasses school psychologists, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, right? It's not just teachers. So we hired 59 new hires on this date last year. We had 40 at this time. Currently, for projection of new hires for next year, we have currently 29 already who has signed contracts. But I don't have it broken out by level or position type.
Are those new FTE, any of them new FTEs, or they're all FTEs that were vacated since last year?
A combination, yeah. I did tell Jill, I think we had just started the break, we are commiserate to the, definitely to the region in terms of vacancies. I have some contacts up in Chicago. I know that we are commiserate to that area as well. I would err on the side of saying the nation, but for sure, at least in this Midwest area.
I have the MOU as well, if you want to
Okay.
look at.
Is it okay that we let Sherry go? Did anybody have, or you?
I had one more piece of information
Okay,
that I
thank
was
you.
tasked with. It was finding out if other entities do sign-on bonuses or supplemental
Thank you.
contracts specific to special education. I can tell you, these are the 4 districts that I sought out, so DeSoto, Blue Valley, Lawrence, Olathe. Currently, DeSoto does not do anything. Lawrence doesn't do anything. Olathe doesn't do anything. Lawrence is exploring looking at some sort of a SPED stipend, but they are not sure what that's going to look like. And Blue Valley reported that they do a sign-on bonus, but it is spread over the course of 3 years.
So you didn't reach out to KCK?
I did not.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. Because they have something, I think.
So it was DeSoto, Lawrence, and Blue Valley?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Olathe.
Oh, and
Oh, I didn't hear Olathe. That's the one I missed. I think it was no. It was Olathe no?
Right, it was
Yeah.
no. Yep.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you pulling that all together and presenting to us today.
Thanks, Sherry.
So I can put that up on the screen?
Yeah, for folks to sort of at least know what's in the MOU, what's in the works now. Is there an expiration date on that MOU?
Yes.
It is a year-to-year MOU, and I hope I'm not speaking completely incorrectly here, but I think we've done this as an MOU because of the exorbitant cost of going to 5 out of 7 at the secondary level. And a fear, I think, from both parties that if it's something that's hard-coded into our P&A, we may have an immovable, very large budgetary item. And so I think there's an intention to continue all of the provisions in this MOU and to keep continuing it, but understanding that in the event of a budget crisis or something like that, at least it would be something this team could consider without having to change P&A language.
Can we ask Russ about that? I thought that we moved salaries from the custodial salaries into the capital outlay fund, so, and then also set aside parts of our budget a couple years ago to cover the cost of hiring additional staff to get to 5 out of 7.
Rachel, will you
Yeah,
just
we-
walk us through the main components so we don't sort of read line by line, but as you're scrolling, can Rachel or someone walk us through just sort of what the concepts are in it, and then we'll visit
Yeah.
the Russ question, and then I
Sure.
think Mike had something.
So the primary component on this MOU and a huge lift of work that this team did, was it just implemented? We did it half the year before last and full this year, right?
Yeah, we started to move staff to teaching 5 out of 7 in the 21-22 year, and then all of them by the 22-23 year. So we did this MOU because once we had everyone teaching 5 out of 7 at the secondary general education level, we included a stipend for those that taught 6.
Correct. And so this moves all secondary general education teachers to teaching 5 out of 7 periods and receiving a stipend if they teach a 6th period. And then because we wanted to acknowledge workload of special education teachers and efforts to reduce work assignments for special education teachers, it also memorializes work that's occurring under Sherry Dumoulin to make sure average caseloads stay in that range of 10 to 15, to provide the paperwork days, and then strategies for addressing teacher staffing shortages, some of those which she touched on in her presentation.
Sped teacher
earlier.
staffing shortages or all?
Yes,
Sped.
just sped
Okay.
teacher shortages.
So it provides a stipend for teachers teaching over 6. It commits to the 10 to 15 caseload and the protected paperwork days. And then finally, the last thing you said was ways to recruit. Did you say stipend?
Strategies to address special education teacher staffing shortages.
Were there specific strategies in here, or you just put it into work?
Using
Okay.
instructional aids to assist with service delivery, consideration for additional paperwork days, which again, she also touched on that earlier. SPED coordinators holding a monthly meeting in buildings to facilitate professional development and support. And then there's a provision about secondary principals as caseload and the master schedule allows or scheduling secondary special education teachers to a consult hour during student support hour.
You all haven't talked much about monthly meetings for support or consult hours. Are those happening? No problem there, and that's why you haven't talked much about them? I did hear the list of what instructional aides do, but consult hours?
I think that one thing that Sherry mentioned was that the instructional specialists and the behavior specialists are there to work, they have specific buildings they work with to help with training of staff and curricular
Okay.
needs. And however, that this year, that was a struggle because with our para staffing shortages, those people were filling in those buildings. And so it led to difficulties with their other, supporting the staff with.
Right, she said
those
for
things.
training, help with curricular ID.
Interpreting data, IEPs,
Developing
assessment.
IEPs, right,
Right.
resources. So, okay. What about consult hour? That's not necessarily an issue, driving issue around this?
It is. I've heard from, Sherry shared that she had some feedback from some staff that would have preferred not to have a seminar instead of getting a consult hour. I've heard, lack of a better term, the opposite, that they would rather have, teach 5 classes, have a plan, have a consult hour.
Do all
and
the
a
special
seminar.
ed teachers have to do that the same way?
No, they don't.
Okay.
I know one school where the staff first semester had taught 5 classes, had a plan, and had a consult, the SPED staff. But then, because of numbers and different things, they had to change that at semester time. And to change their schedule to be similar to the other 4 high schools. Not because it has to be similar, just because that's what they were doing. So that's kind of what I wanted to find out from Dr. Higgins, as well as what's that looking like for next year? Are we going to, we have SPED staff scheduled for 6 classes with a plan time, right? And yeah. Because because I know it's in here that we want to try to do that, but I also wondered if we could have something in here about, if that's not achievable to have them teach 5, could we discuss the possibility of not having that seminar assignment? So, but anyway. I know we're trying to just go through here, so let's just go through here. And look, a lot of us are in favor of this MOU. I think it has a lot of great things in it.
And we can certainly continue to update the provision 4 regarding workload of secondary special education teachers. I know that we probably want to continue to recognize their workload as we renew the MOU with regard to general education secondary teachers, so that our special education teachers aren't lost in that or don't feel like their workload's not being recognized. So, I mean, it may make sense as we work to renew this MOU, although I have that, I think, on our agenda for our last meeting, but still, we could look at this language, make sure it's current, and make sure that all the efforts that we're doing are captured in there and memorialized in there, so.
Okay.
So I don't know, we've got other people ready to present, and I know we're not through the special education issue, but because they're here and ready and prepared, it might make sense for them to go ahead and present on those other issues, so that we have data on each of sort of our sub-workload issues, and then go through to solutions, if
Yes.
everyone's okay
Makes
with
sense to
that.
me.
Sounds like
Yes.
everyone ready? Okay. And so I believe next on our agenda is, well, we've got 3 things left, and I don't know that it matters what order, but we've got the issue of specialists and their caseload and equity with FTE, instructional coaches, counselors, social workers. Is there any order that makes sense? I
I
think we've
think
got,
Dr. Higgins would be really quick, I'm guessing.
okay.
Thanks for being here. Why do we seem really sort of solemn and scary committee today, don't we? We're really pretty nice. Just, I don't know, this one,
It's that time of the school year, and
Yeah.
I will also share that allergies are making me a zombie, so I don't know if anyone else is in that boat, but.
So
yeah, I had to go seek out coffee.
I'll first speak to what Jill just mentioned with what's happening at the high schools in regards to seminar and the use of that time as consult. And I will say that I don't have any information to speak on that. I wasn't prepared for that. And to be honest, Amanda Wade is probably a better source of information because she really knows what's going on at each of the high schools in regards to the consult, the use of seminar and things of that nature. So I know each of our high schools might be utilizing that a little bit differently based on the needs of the school and what those teachers have shared with them and their administrations, and they've really tried to tailor that approach to those buildings. So that's what I'll share on that. I did come prepared somewhat to speak to teachers at the secondary level teaching between different departments and the prevalence of that and the number of preps that comes into play with that. So currently this year, there are 13 teachers at the middle school and high school level who teach between departments. Tentatively for next year, there are 13 teachers who are scheduled to teach between departments as well. Okay. This year, of those 13 teachers, 7 of them have 2 preps. 3 of them have 4 preps. 1 of them has 4 preps. And 1 of them has 5 preps.
Can you say that again?
Yes. So 7 of those 13 teachers have 2 preps between the 2 departments. 4 of those teachers have 3 preps between the 2 departments. 1 of them has 4 preps between the 2 departments. And 1 of them has 5 preps between the 2 departments. Next year, of those 13 teachers, 4 of them have 2 preps, 3 of them have 3 preps, and then 6 of them it's TBD. The master schedules aren't done yet, so I'm not sure how many preps those folks are going to have. Speaking from personal experience, and also, I'll tag on to what Dr. Dane mentioned earlier, that, a lot of these instances, which 13 is not a tremendous amount, right? I would say are very specialized on why that is occurring. Why there's a crossover between departments. Some of it is because the teachers are asking for that to happen because of what their certifications are. In regards to the preps, Dr. Dane mentioned that these are many times related to language classes, and in order to offer those courses to our kids to be able to have those opportunities, it does come down to some really unique situations that we have to kind of creatively come up with in order to be able to offer some of those different language classes. So I think that our building principals recognize those individual situations and want to be able to work with staff members to creatively to help them. If they're teaching 5 preps across 2 different departments, I don't think that's lost on the building principals to say, hey, what can we do to help this person out? Whether it be through their supervision or through their seminar, having some personalized conversations with those employees is something that our principals are pretty good at doing and working through with those teachers. So, questions for me?
Yes, and I apologize, I didn't realize I hadn't been explicit to ask you specifically about the secondary SPED schedules. So just, you're saying that it'd be better to talk with Amanda Wade about their specific schedule with like how many classes they're assigned and whether or not they have like a seminar assigned to them and that kind of thing?
Amanda knows very well what each of the high schools does in regards to consult, seminar, and how that looks.
Okay.
Can I ask, what is a consult? I'm not in the secondary world.
That's a great question.
Do you want to take that, or I'd be happy to?
It's time that's allotted for those special education teachers to spend related specifically towards their IEPs and those IEP students. So they may be pulling kids for testing or meeting with them in regards to their goals and progress monitoring. So it's really time that they have for consulting around their caseload of students, separate from their planning period. That is really geared towards planning for instruction in their COTOC classes.
Did that exist before the MOU? The
No.
consult time, okay.
Well, because we didn't really have, the MOU also allowed for student support hour, right? Like where this general ed staff would teach 5 classes, have 1 plan, and have 1 student support hour, which is like a supervision. We were trying to use different language. So I think that the consult was like the special education version of a possible student support hour? No?
It wasn't called consult, but we used to provide teachers with that hour. When they were teaching 5, we would provide an hour or do our best based upon the master schedule to provide them that additional hour to work with their caseload.
Oh, okay, so SPED staff at some point, some of them might have had 5 classes, 1 plan, and 1 consult.
That is correct. And
when everyone else was teaching 6?
That's correct, and that goes back a ways too. Again, it just depended upon the number of staff,
Okay.
what the master schedule fell out to. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single one of them did. If they didn't, we tried to rotate that by semester or by school year to give an equity piece to those teachers to make sure they got that they didn't call it consult. I can't even remember what they called it back in the day.
I guess I thought that everybody was teaching 6 from about 2010 on, that just everyone had 6 classes and a plan.
We didn't go to 6 until 15.
Yeah, 15.
Fully 6, that's
Fully,
correct.
okay, so there were some people
There
that were
were
teaching
some.
C.
Again, it depended upon how the schedule felt. There were always some teachers within a department that would have 6. The perfect world was obviously 5, but it did have 6 throughout the course of time.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, one more question because I'm elementary. What's the typical number of preps like a high school or middle school teacher would have?
Just general ed,
Yeah,
2 to 3.
okay.
Great question. Are there other questions?
No? I mean,
Okay, well, thank
I have
you.
a question. What do we do if a teacher's like, I don't want this many preps? How does that go down?
I mean, if they're certified in it, they can be asked to teach it, so
Yeah, we usually
that's
have
pretty much it.
just a really candid conversation with
mean-
them. It starts with, what do you want? What do you- That's how we begin the process of building the master schedules, is what are the classes that you would like to teach, what are the preps that you would like to prepare for and navigate. And so, as to speak in reply to Dr. Higgins' comments, if a lot of those teachers that he listed, they have asked for those additional preps and those different additional subjects. So that's where it starts, and then we kind of navigate those options without. And again, with languages, for example, if we have German 1, German 2, German 3, German 4,
Okay.
German 5, German 6,
Those are all different.
and we only have one German teacher in the building,
Okay.
we have to embed German 5 and German 6 to make sure that we can offer all of those classes and navigate that. And most of the time, they do want to promote
Okay.
those. And
So when
the
you,
tough thing is, it's all driven by enrollment, right? So
Yeah.
when you have German 1 through 6 and you have 86 students enrolled in German 1 through 6, then we look at the opportunity, well, then we don't want to put that teacher on a half-time schedule and reassign them for the second half of their contract to another building. So what can we do for this year if, where the enrollment is low in those programs? What do we do?
We've also had numerous scenarios for teachers teaching 6. Sometimes they would volunteer if they wanted to pilot a course.
Okay.
Sometimes they would rather have 6 courses of smaller numbers instead of 5 courses of higher numbers. So instead of having a packed class or full classrooms for 5 periods, they would rather have that dispersed throughout the day for 6. So depending upon the building, depending upon the department, depending upon the teacher, every scenario is different.
Okay.
can I ask, when someone asked the question, what does a gen ed teacher have for preps on average? Was the answer 2?
2 to 3.
2 to 3. Okay, and then the other question I had is, besides language, are there other certifications that are crossing over, or whatever you'd want to call it? Or is it mostly all these, out of these 13 teachers?
No, they're not all language.
They're not
We
all-
have teachers teaching social studies and ELA, science and math, PE and social studies. They're all over the board. In fact, I would say there's more of those than language involved.
Oh, okay,
Correct.
interesting, okay.
Yeah.
And then out of the 13 teachers that teach between departments, the one has 4 preps, one has 5 preps. We shouldn't say names in here, but are those folks with 4 and 5 preps folks that want to do that? Or does anyone know? I think that's kind of an important question.
Yes, I know for one of them, there was a frustration being between 2 departments. There was a.
Oh, you mean, you're saying there's issue with even the 7 and the 4?
They were frustrated being between 2 departments and not having 2 plan times to help with that.
I guess what I'm asking is 7 people that have 2 preps, is that problematic? 4 people that have 3 preps, is that problematic? Or is that just equal to what they would have if they didn't cross over?
Yeah.
So then the problematic issues are when they probably go over 3, and that's one person with 4 and one person with 5. And you're saying those folks may have said they want to do that, but they also want them more plan time on that?
Well, there are P&A guidelines around the number of preps you can teach.
Right, and that's what I was bringing up. It's kind of moot now, though, that language, because the language says if you have 4 or more preps, you will only teach 5 classes.
Well, everyone's
But all of us are now teaching 5.
I see.
So And when we first were focusing this, I kind of said, I think that the solution or whatever is what's happening now. The individual
Yeah.
conversations that Dr. Higgins was talking about between the principal and the staff member. So,
I would agree with that. I will also say I went back to the earliest master schedule I could find that I have access to at one of the high schools during the 2012-2013 school year. Consult was listed on that for SPED, so consult at least goes back to 2012-2013, and I would say it goes back further than that.
It goes further back than that. It just wasn't, might not have been called consult.
And by the way, is consult applicable to K through 12? Special
No.
ed?
No.
It's only high school?
It's just secondary.
Secondary? Okay.
are secondary average caseloads larger than elementary average caseloads? Or are they about no?
The top of the scale goes higher. The range goes higher at middle school and high school than elementary.
Well, she gave that information, I
She
think.
just gave it.
Yeah.
It's lower on the bottom end for elementary, but it's higher on the top end for secondary.
No.
I can screen share.
8 to 14.
And then high school's 12 to 14.
What year are you looking at?
They're all about 14 is the high.
14 to 15, so yeah.
Okay,
So
I was curious.
those that have consult, do they also get those 4 days of
Paperwork?
paperwork days?
That's for everyone.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, is there anyone that has a consult hour anymore this year? I didn't think there was anyone that still had a consult hour this year at the secondary level, or at the high school level, but I don't know.
But isn't it
That's a
built into the MOU?
I thought I heard Sherry say that it varied per building.
Okay.
In terms of when that consult was, whether it's seminar or built into their schedule.
Yeah, so like
Got it.
at West, we try to do it during seminar time. So that's my
Got it.
console hour.
So they call the seminar time consult hour?
Yeah.
Okay,
I believe that most of the high schools use seminar for consult.
Yes,
okay.
So a SPED teacher isn't assigned a seminar.
right.
Correct.
That's what I was trying to, thank you. I appreciate
What
it.
would you say, Mike?
SPED teacher is not assigned a seminar when other
Yes.
teachers are.
Okay. Because that provides for their consult time?
Yes.
Okay, understood.
Which is what, 90 minutes on Tuesday and then
20 minutes on Thursday.
20 minutes on Thursday?
Oh, yeah.
So is that consistent with the language in the MOU that provides?
Well, so that's kind of what I was asking. If the language talks about a consult hour, it says consult hour during student support hour. So maybe we should just
For special ed, it's
change it,
consult
because it's not
hour during
necessarily
seminar.
consult hour during the student support hour. It could be consult during seminar, which is what Mike was saying. Anyway.
Is that a solution, or is that a Rachel note for an update on the MOU accuracy?
Rachel note?
Okay, I'm not capturing it then. Do we have other presenters? And thank you so very much.
Yeah,
Higgins.
thank you, Dr. Higgins.
I think Dr. Gonger's been waiting the longest.
Saving the best for last.
Hi.
So I brought my colleague, Mr. Troy Lynch, with me today to share around this topic. And that's because while I want to give you the facts surrounding the situation, I think it's important that you have the perspective of a current instructional coach. So I'm always happy to, represent and advocate on their behalf, but I think that was important in this instance. Thank you.
It was on.
I have a visual for you here. Let me just get that going.
Look at you, overachiever to the max today, right?
She's often described that way.
We've got a presentation, we've got an extra guest.
Don't set the bar too high. We're this close. Okay, so again, we're just talking through instructional coach contracts. We want to just start by painting a picture for you of what the status quo is. So currently, our instructional coaches serve on a teacher contract. Their compensation and days that they serve are no different than anyone else. They have the option of being compensated at an hourly rate for any additional work done outside of the contract, similar to their colleagues. Each coach can be compensated for up to 20 hours of work annually. I think it's important to notice that this has steadily increased over the last 4 years. We started with up to 5 per coach, just for budgeting purposes, and as that need has grown, that number of hours has grown. And then we also allow them to time card to be compensated for time spent on things like new 10-member academy at the district level. So they support building and a district level. So that is the current situation for our instructional coaches.
So most of the, Brittany's going to ask you that.
Should update.
I really have to stop avoiding it. It's going to have to happen.
I do the same thing.
I think I've only got one defer left, so.
The reality is that most of the instructional coaches are working more than the 20 hours that are allowed prior to the beginning of the school year. And there is inconsistency in demand depending on where you're at as an instructional coach and what the building is asking of you in service of the teachers coming back to work, especially that time of year. There's a lot that can be asked of instructional coaches. That's why that number keeps going up, is because we're wearing a lot of hats during that time in service of the building. And then there's also work outside of the contract in preparation for PE, for professional development days throughout the school year, and tying up curriculum things as well. Instructional coaches also serve on a cadre and carry extra loads trying to tie up some of those ends throughout the year, as well as the work we do supporting teachers day to day in the school, focused around helping kids learn and do that. Here's some great examples. Brittany and I actually tried to think through to make sure we were capturing all of the things. We are spending a lot of time for new team member academy, the professional learning, both at the building level and at the district level. So when we're thinking about ideas around how we recruit and retain, instructional coaches are part of that consistency that we offer in new team members every year. We also are responsible for,
Okay, thank you. All right. And we also are responsible for the kicking off the year in each building. So that beginning of the year professional learning day prep, the ongoing building professional learning days I was talking about earlier. Instructional coaches actually serve as the mentor coordinators within the building. And so when we're thinking about especially the load for secondary, making sure that every first-year teacher has a mentor and that they have a successful experience in that program, and then mentoring all of our second-year teachers as well. So at any given time, the load is between, I have one this year, but I know secondary teachers who are getting ready, secondary coaches who are getting ready to mentor 20. I mean, it's a lot at the secondary level especially, and just depending on the building and how many new staff members each year, making sure that they are getting the support they need throughout the entire year as part of the mentor program support. And then we know that curriculum and technology, both the resources, just preparing them and also collecting them, auditing them, all of that has been added really to the coach's plate, especially with one coach in each building. Then we sort of manage that for the building and making sure teachers have what they need. Just a lot of things to get out to people and support their implementation as well.
So the suggestion here would be extending the instructional coach contract to compensate coaches for that work that's occurring outside of the contract. I think it's important to highlight that that's outside of the day-to-day student-centered coaching support they are providing for teachers, and really prioritizing that beginning of the school year time. That's the bulk of that work. We could consider some options for other parts of the year as well, but really the priority would be the beginning of the year. So just some simple options to kind of throw out there for consideration, really either adding 5 days to the contract and prioritizing the beginning of the school year. We could also look at 7 or 10 days. We could get more specific and work out the logistics of that at another time and place, but really just designating specific days and options based on whatever decision we could possibly come to. So the key here is we're flexible. I always think it's good to get some perspective of what our neighbors are doing. So here are some different examples of that. So currently in Blue Valley, there are 16 additional days in the instructional coach contract. I do think it's important to note here that some of that time is spent in the coordinator roles. That role looks a little different in Blue Valley. In Olathe, it's a 10-month contract. So that comes out to roughly 2 extra weeks. KCK, they have different approaches to the instructional coach role. There are building coaches and there are district coaches. If you're a building coach, you have 10 extra days. District coaches have 15 extra days on their contract. and then they all receive a $5,000 stipend in addition to that as well. Spring Hill has 10 additional days in their instructional coach contract, and it's not up there, but the why behind that is DeSoto's not on there because they don't have the instructional coach role. So we did reach out to them about it.
So I think that there are some district-wide benefits. I like to think that day-to-day we're making a big impact in terms of how we serve the kids. But there also are impacts if we think about this as an extension for everybody. Coaches would be available to support all of the district and building level new team member academy. You wouldn't be like cashing in your hours to say like, okay, I've got 3 hours for this new team member academy meeting, and I've got 3 hours to plan all of the PD, and I've got 2 hours for mentoring. Like, you just would be there. You would be able to support all of the new team member academy experience, both in the building and at the district level, to help with the breakouts, to make sure teachers come in getting what they need. We had some feedback earlier this week that was really interesting, that teachers like have very specific needs. You're talking about all the different departments. Like, the more coaches you have, then you have a special group that can facilitate that foreign language session. And then you have the right people at the table for special education, for elementary, to be able to go into individual grade levels. Like, you could just put all hands there to make the experience even better for people getting what they need during those sessions. And then also just making sure that we're offering the best level of professional learning that we can. So I'm a teacher at heart, obviously, it's paid as like a teacher, and so I know, just like you all know, that like the better prepped things go, the better experience they are for our adults. And adults want to come in August and have it be awesome. Like, there really is no time to waste so that we're ready for kids. Coaches would be also able to start the year together as a group. And so one thing that Dr. Gonzer has worked really hard to do is not pull us till the end of August, so that our primary function from school day one is being in our buildings and getting things going. But when we have new coaches, when we're trying to make sure that we're ready to roll out initiatives, there's not time in that with the 20 hours, especially because the 20 hours has been very a la carte. So Dr. Gonzer could not start all coaches at the same time with the same note until August. I talked a little bit about mentoring earlier, but we know that that's like a state requirement, but it's also part of what makes retention happen, and making sure that teachers are getting what they need. And so making sure that mentors know what to do, as well as mentoring second-year teachers, because sometimes it can feel a little bit like everybody was really excited about your success in year one, and then we need to make sure they have that similar experience with the coach in year two. And so we take that role really seriously. Second-year teachers are awesome, but also deserve that same level of support just to get their feet under them. I talked about curriculum, device distribution. Those things end up being something that coaches could do. Coaches get really excited about the idea that iPads would all be ready on day one, right? Like, that instead of running around for several weeks, things would be ready to go for teachers. And having time to do that is not currently in the 20 hours. And just also that we are doing a lot for professional learning. Like, it has to be top level for it to be meaningful for teachers. And so there's acknowledgement that that's just part of the workload that we're asking of our coaches to do. And then it sort of standardizes it a little bit, instead of saying like, oh, we have unexpected expenses because the hours come in very differently, time card at a different rate and things like that, or they come in at different times on the time card. And so it's just sort of levels that out to make it a little bit easier, so it's an expected expense instead of unexpected.
So on that note with expenses, I wanted to kind of demonstrate this for you. So this is what we are currently doing. We've got a cost comparison for you here. So currently, we have 55 instructional coaches total. I thought it was important to distinguish the roles that they serve in. So we are asking to include special education instructional coaches, ELL instructional coaches. This captures everyone here. Each coach should be compensated right now for 20 additional hours of work, and that's at a rate of $26.19 per hour, including Social Security and benefits. So when you do the math on that, it's currently costing us about $28,809. For comparison, if we were to move to one of those other options, this would be about the annual expense based on 5, 7, or 10 days. I think it's important to point out here that just like all of our colleagues, our instructional coaches are paid at different daily rates. So these figures are based on the average instructional coach daily rate, and this would not be exact, but it gives you an idea of what the cost of each of those different scenarios have come to.
Brittany, while we're on the numbers, a question in the comparison notes that you had from our neighboring districts, what is their model for coaches? Because my perception is that we have kind of a different approach to what we're doing with instructional coaches in every building, and I know that that's not the case in these other districts.
Yeah, that's a great point. So as you guys know, we are very focused on the student-centered coaching model. So that means that we are in classrooms supporting students, asking teachers, how can we help you support your students, not working in administrative or curricular roles. Some of that work that instructional coaches do in other districts is what we are needing some time for outside of the contract, not in an administrative capacity, but in some of that curriculum and resource support and some things that people who are more like curriculum coordinators would do in other districts. So we need additional support in that area outside of the student-centered coaching work.
So my perception, these other districts don't have an instructional coach in every building.
Some do, some don't. Some have more than one in each building, but they serve in different ways.
Right.
Yeah, the coaching model is different from district to district, for sure.
And just a technical note, so when I met with Brittany, I asked her to meet with the coaches and get their feedback. And so her report is a report based on her position as the Director of Professional Learning and the Supervisor of Instructional Coaches. She's not operating as a designated negotiator for the Board of Education. So while she may be making suggestions on behalf of the coaches, it clearly needs to be talked about as a team.
Absolutely. Yep.
Does that make sense? Okay.
The other comment that I might add is that, and I think there are maybe a number of things that our instructional coaches do outside the contract day that aren't specifically listed, but I know that we rely heavily on our instructional coaches for feedback and input for interviewing and hiring new staff, and a lot of times that happens outside the contract day and even over the summer. And I think those are significant roles that they play to help us succeed.
I mean, I think it helps us look competitive, right? Like, it's easy when I sit in an interview to be like, yeah, and I get to be the one that supports, right? Like, if you come back, we are going to continue to work together. Like, it's part of, I think, what sets us aside is that I'm able to say, like, and I'm going to meet with you every week. Like, I'm happy to co-teach in your class. Like, we're all about the student success. It would be really hard to say no to, like, no, I'll skip those interviews. I don't want that relationship with that new hire. Like, of course we're going to show up for those. They're awesome.
I would just say, too, I think we all see the huge value in our coaches. And then I agree with everything in here that there would be a massive benefit to having these additional days. I guess I'm thinking, too, that there's clearly some financial pieces here, too, that maybe after we flush this out as a team, that it's a part of the compensation financial discussion once we get to that.
So I've got to say, Mike, I think you and I are on the same track, and tell me what others think. While we're on it, I'd like to get kind of buy-in on this. I created a new issue statement on this, and I think we should pull it out of the issue statement on workload. And here's what I think the issue statement is. How do we appropriately compensate instructional coaches?
Sounds good.
And you're looking at me.
So we can pull that away from workload, and then it sounds like there's a recommendation from a group that worked on this. Mike, you clarified it's not a district proposal, it's a joint group that worked on something you guys have to look at as a team as you go into compensation, I guess.
It was Dr. Gonzer and then instructional coaches, I think, that you surveyed.
And instructional coaches are bargaining unit, right? That's why.
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
teacher
confirm.
contract, yep.
Okay.
I was waiting until, I wasn't sure if you were finished.
All done.
Okay, because I just had a few questions too.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
I don't know, Stephanie, do you know that we shared your screen?
Oh, no.
Okay,
How long has you been sharing my screen?
just now.
Oh, because I've been playing with this spacing forever. I don't have to have it shared, but we'll watch a scuba diver.
You must
Do you
be
want to share?
Plugged in. No, I just noticed
Oh,
that
yes,
it went
I am
from
plugged in, okay.
Dr. Gonzer's to yours, so I was just,
Don't know how that happened or when it happened. There you go.
okay. Okay. I think at the beginning, you talked about 20 hours allowed for coaches to work outside the contract day. is that just told to them when they become a coach, and you guys kind of just decided that was a good amount for now?
Honestly, that was the maximum amount that we could budget for.
Okay, so it's part of what you're budgeting?
Yes.
Got it, okay. You were saying that every I coach runs a cadre? And, no?
Part of a cadre, yeah.
Part of a
Yeah, yeah,
cadre.
yeah. Yep.
They serve on a cadre, they do not lead those cadres.
Oh, okay.
No, because we want to defer to the people who are using the materials most intimately all the time, but just as a support to be like, I work with this fantastic fourth grade teacher, and I'm always like, tell me your ideas, but like getting to coach at the table as we create those documents, sort of with the big picture perspective to support grade level teachers. Yeah.
And are there cadres, like, I know at the secondary level, math, for each different subject that's taught, but then also is there like a fourth, specifically just for fourth grade, or is it fourth grade math?
There's all four subject areas for every grade level.
Okay, got it. So are some instructional coaches serving on more than one cadre?
In recent years, we've really tried to limit that
Okay.
for a few reasons. One being we didn't want to stretch our instructional coaches too thin.
Right.
That's time outside of their building when we pull them for those cadres. So we really
Right.
want to limit that so they can serve teachers. Also, we want to ensure teacher leadership on those cadres. We
Right.
don't want more coaches than teachers.
Sure.
So ideally, no coaches are serving on a single cadre. I will tell you, we have a couple of instances where some coaches were deeply embedded in a cadre and needed to finish that work before being able to pull back.
Okay, yeah.
And I want to just say, early childhood, she's serving on all the cadres.
Yeah.
And she's part-time.
The early childhood instructional coach is serving on every early childhood cadre? Okay. How many early childhood cadres are there?
I would also know, because I also serve on all of those.
There
I
you
would
go.
say 3 to 4.
Okay.
I don't know that actually. And that individual is a half-time coach too.
Okay. Another one. Okay, you talked about instructional coaches being like a mentor coordinator almost in the building. So you're working with the staff that are the mentors to help them determine what they should be doing, and then are the instructional coaches also being asked to go ahead and mentor second-year teachers as well, or?
Yeah, so I think I could, like, just to sum up what my day looked like in, like, today, I handled both of those things. So before I came over here, I have a sixth grade teacher who is mentoring a new teacher, first-year teacher, and she came in today and said, hey, this is what we're doing, we're noticing, we're doing these observations right now, so I'm supporting her as she's mentoring that first-year teacher, and then she said, hey, next year, do you want to start the year with a coaching cycle that we would all do together? So to sort of like transition that over, but I will be the second-year teacher's mentor. So we will be engaged in the mentoring process next year, and hopefully working together on inquiry. So supporting that mentor, and then next year I will mentor the second-year teacher.
Okay.
So our instructional coaches do serve as the mentor for all second-year individuals in their building, and that looks like instructional coaching cycles. So it's not anything different. There are no additional requirements. But then serving in that mentor coordinator role for the building level helps. So when myself and our human resources department, when we push out reminders on licensure expire, or hey, there's a deadline coming for this, we've got a point person in each building that we can then say, hey, you know who your 5 new teachers are. You need to give them this reminder, this deadline is coming. So they serve in that capacity. That's one example.
Okay.
As we're on this, I think you just answered my question on this too, but I just want to clarify. So I know first year teachers and their mentors are going to meetings after contract hours with their mentors. Is that happening with the instructional coaches as the second year mentor as well?
It is not.
Okay.
And our instructional coaches cannot serve as a first year mentor either.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Yep.
I think I already got that one answered though. Okay, yeah, thank you.
I had one more question too. So you had talked about a little bit how there's potential extra preparations for items throughout the school year, rather than just the beginning or the end. Would there still be a need for that hourly compensation, even if we added those 5, 7, or 10 days at the beginning? Are those instructional coaches still doing, would those instructional coaches still be doing work outside of their contract hours in preparation for those items?
That's highly possible, yes, considering there would be additional professional learning days throughout the year. They're oftentimes helping in the preparations for. So depending on what that structure looked like, that could be a remaining need.
And then my other kind of follow-up with that, but instructional coaches should also be getting a protected plan time, because they're under the same contract as teachers. So would then that be a potential expectation that they would complete that during their protected plan time? I mean, given that nothing can be expected over your plan time, but.
Sure. I think there's two questions there. So one,
Yeah.
should they have a plan time? Yes. And should they be doing that work during their plan time? Maybe. Well,
Which, again,
I don't know.
you can't require them to necessarily do X, Y, Z during plan, but.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate to say exactly what anyone should be
Yeah,
doing.
exactly,
But that's
yeah.
why I said maybe.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Anything else?
Oh, can I say, this committee kind of takes, this group takes committee recommendations under consideration. Does it make sense for you to email your PowerPoint pages that had what you all put up as possibilities to this group?
Certainly. Who particularly would you like me to send those to?
We can put that in our joint, or in our shared folder.
Thanks.
So if you send it to any one of us, we can upload it into our joint Google Drive folder.
We will do that before we leave this room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ready for Pam? Ms. Lewis?
I know, Lewis and Lewis right next to each other.
We're pepping up Stephanie.
It's because you got the elementary and the house together, right?
Get ready to be energized. Here we go.
Yeah, I just made a hire before I came in, so absolutely
Nice.
energized, so. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reflect this on the screen then. Okay, so here today to join you to talk about elementary specials, and luckily I have some elementary colleagues here at the table to help me out with any questions you might have, or, you know, kind of different aspects of it, because it can get a little bit confusing. So kind of starting back with just giving you an overview of things. Hold on, I feel like I'm froze up for a minute. There we go. Giving you a little bit of background. So while this is my second year in the role of elementary HR, I've been in the district for 25 years. So sometimes when I reference things since the beginning of time, because I feel like I have been here since a long time. So I have that historical perspective as a principal as well as in this role. So when we talk about elementary specials, we have 34 elementary schools. And historically, we have been staffed at 1.0 FTE for each of those specials at the building. It's just the historical nature of that, so that when a specials person retires or resigns, then that posting for a 1.0 FTE, and then we refill that position. We have some exceptions to that, and those schools are listed for you. The one that I would point out is Lenexa Hills. Of course, that's our newest building, and when that building was opened, we hired at that time for 0.5 specials. We recognized that we didn't need a 1.0 FTE and hired that way when we opened the building. We do have a school supporting them because they do actually need more than 0.5 FTE, but definitely did not need a 1.0. So just to kind of give you some challenges that impact specials instruction and the scheduling, you'll notice on a couple of those that some of them have an inconsistent FTE. We had a few other schools, Crestview, Deemer come to mind off the top of my head. That's a challenge, for example, when you have someone that's a 0.7, someone that's a 0.8, someone that's a 1.0, and then you're wanting to have a consistent master schedule, especially block instructional time. It also is a challenge if I'm needing to utilize that building to support another building. So that's a challenge. So one thing we are looking at is how can we maybe increase some FTE, but increasing it for the purpose of making it consistent, and just kind of coming to that level of what we've done. So I think we added a .1 to Deemer PE because they were .9 and every other special staff member was 1.0. So trying to make some consistencies there, and we've really come a long way with that. And then also, one other thing that I will point out from, in working with principals and of course in this role, is that when we have less than a 1.0 FTE at elementary specials, we do struggle with retention because a lot of times when a 1.0 FTE becomes available, they apply for that, or sometimes, unfortunately, they leave the district for that. Don't get me wrong, we occasionally have situations to where that part-time schedule works for staff members, but overall, it really does impact that retention. We also try to work together with our secondary schools and try to match that up with some coaching opportunities, so that's just another way that we work together to do that. So kind of talking about the guidelines, when we look at staffing with elementary schools. So 24 class sections equals a 1.0 FTE. And that basically then ensures that there's 250 minutes of the required 230 minutes of plan time, gives them that extra 20 minutes that a lot of times they are teaming together as a specials team. We might utilize them in some other capacity, but that provides that consistency. The other piece is that specials, as of right now, starts at 8:30 each day, so that allows that little bit of prep time for them, an art teacher getting materials together. It also allows them to support students. They might triage with students, just kind of has that little bit of flexibility there that I know we really utilize. Then we have schools with over 24 sections. So when we have a school over 24 sections, then we obviously need to support them with additional FTE. And that's where our small schools come into play. And so they support those larger schools. One thing I would note, it is ever changing. So Allison Starosky, who I like to say is one of my best friends since moving into HR in the budget office, we work together in reviewing Skyward, and every week we're looking at class sections and saying, are we looking at, we're at the top of the range and we're looking as if we're going to need to add a section, or the enrollment's not where we expected it to be and we might reduce a section. So we just had a conversation yesterday that impacts 2 different buildings. So just knowing that that's fluid based on the way that elementary staffing is done and with our classroom guidelines. But really, most of the changes take place between that April and August timeframe. Then also, occasionally, we will have enrollment increases that may add a section. If we had an increase in enrollment throughout the fall semester, that we might add a section in January. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So that's another, just caveat that we have to plan for to make sure we have special staffing to serve those students and provide that time. We also, when we have schools supporting, of course, we have to allot for travel time. It's kind of a bummer that not all of our schools work out well as far as location between our smaller schools and our larger schools. So that's a little bit of a challenge when you're trying to look at smaller schools and wanting them to support, but then realizing the distance, and there might be a closer school to utilize that. So that we have some changes with that all the time. Right now, we have 7 schools slated to provide support to other schools. So some of the factors that impact that scheduling is also the fact that where we might have a school that is a smaller school, so they don't have as many general classroom sections, they may have a specialized program that we have to allot time for specials for those specialized programs. And so some of them, it's not always, if there's 3 sections of special ed students, classrooms, sometimes those are combined into 2 because we will have students that are also mainstreamed in an inclusion setting for specials. Sometimes it changes based on the needs of students. You know, you have a new student that's transitioning in, they might need some extra support and some pre-teaching and that type of instruction before they transition in to their classroom for specials. So we always have to keep those things in mind at the elementary level. And then I've listed the schools that have specialized programs that do need extra additional support for specials beyond their general classroom sections. So then we talk about that, yes, we have schools that aren't full-time at 24 sections. And so, as I shared, they may be spending part of that time supporting another building, supporting specialized programs in those sections for instruction. It's obviously travel time, as I mentioned. But then these are other different areas in which they support students. So if they have extra time in their schedule that they are not assigned for specials, then the principals work in the master schedule to assign based on the needs of students and the school. These are some different ways in which our specials teachers are utilized. This is something that we talk with our principals about. It actually was a topic today as we're planning for next year, just really utilizing our specials teachers to really impact learning for our students and also SEL support as well. So when we look at that master schedule, it's the principal working with the building leadership team, that instructional support team. That schedule might be based on, you know, looking at data and the needs of a grade level and if they need more support. And so then really working and how does that best meet the needs of students? That's going to look differently in different schools. So that's how that time is utilized. Any questions on that? Just kind of.
I have a quick question. So the students that require like the adaptive PE or the music therapy, is that the specialist providing it or is that a different specialist providing it? And is it at the same time as when the other kids are attending their special?
Good question, Amber. It is usually a different teacher that has that specialized licensure. And so where you might have a specialized classroom, some of the students receive an adaptive PE instructor, others are in with the general PE teacher. We also have one of our teachers who is .8. She's general PE .8 at Tomahawk, but then she is also .2 FTE that she provides adaptive PE. So as far as is it at the same time, I would bet that it's not because of, you know, just matching all those schedules up. So that probably isn't consistent for the most part because those are fewer staff members trying to serve students in multiple buildings. And so Dr. Schumacher and I have been having conversations about this over the course, like I said, since stepping into this role last year, and just saying, how do we even begin to start restructuring the current model we have that is set up to where we are more in line with FTE based on, you know, student enrollment at buildings, while also taking on, you know, remembering all these different nuances that I just discussed about supporting other buildings, supporting specialized programs. So restructuring, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, when we do that, we would probably, you know, looking at it in different ways, we could have a large disruption to schools across the district, that it could impact multiple staff members if we started really looking in this and just doing a full restructure and some reassignments. Also, you know, just when you start sharing a lot of staff across schools and you have that travel time, that's going to impact the being able to consistently schedule. And as those of us in the elementary world know how important it is that we meet those instructional minutes that we have to meet, that we have that uninterrupted instructional time, that we have Tier 1 core time, we have consistent Tier 2 intervention time, that would be a challenge. So knowing that, we have to keep that in mind so that we provide that consistency. And then, of course, as we know, anytime we have staff that's traveling, that's time away from students, and considering the impact of that as well. And so if we have a very tight staffing model, we also have to remember that we still have to have the flexibility, as I shared earlier, about when we do have enrollment shifts, when we have specialized programs that we have enrollment shifts with students there or needs based on students transitioning into the program. And also, just something also to keep in mind, that some of our smaller buildings, of course, have fewer classified staff, and so they don't have as many staff members to provide intervention, and that one classified staff member might be, assisting in the cafeteria. We do really utilize our specials staff to provide that intervention time, especially in small schools. And then, staffing based on enrollment in sections and being tight with that, you can see kind of where that might impact staff. Would we need as many staff members? No, we wouldn't. So, would we look at reducing actual staff or, looking at kind of some different aspects of this and how we can maybe transition into restructuring this model to make it more aligned with the FTE while still keeping in mind all the needs we have with special staffing at the elementary level. I think a couple things that come to mind, when I was a principal, and I think of this not just for me as a principal and wanting to be able to work with my staff, but as the staff member, when you're not full-time in a building or you're split between buildings, just that piece of feeling a part of the community and just, making sure that as a principal, they're getting the communication and they're not missing out on different things that you do as a team. And I just think that can really have an impact on a staff member with that relationship and that sense of belonging. And then also if they have a reduced schedule and they are, leave at 1:30, we don't require them, of course, to stay for a staff meeting at 3:30. So then they're missing out on some of that's communication and team building and collaboration, professional learning. So I think those are all things to keep in mind as well. So kind of talking about how do we kind of address some of these needs to staff a little more tightly with this while also having some flexibility is kind of what are we going to do moving forward rather than really let's just restructure the whole model and impact so many people. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is just the continuity of a program. And so when you have staff that they have been in a school and developed a strong music program over the course of years and those relationships, then really shifting all of that's going to impact that. And that impacts the culture of a school, it impacts students. So just an entire restructure thinking about that, how that would impact not just staff, but students in a community. How can we kind of transition for the future? So really, Dr. Schumacher and I have been talking about, as we have staff that do retire and the opportunity to hire comes up, really looking at those individual situations and saying, is this an opportunity that we don't need to hire a 1.0 FTE, that we can look at a 0.5 FTE and support with another building and still be able to have the flexibility to meet those other needs that I've mentioned throughout. So, where we would say, well, if you have this many sections of general ed classroom, you're automatically going to have a 0.5 or you're automatically going to have a 0.8. We'd really have to look at it on an individual basis based on also if they support other schools, what their enrollment trends look like as far as if they have a lot of shifting with class sections. So that's kind of where we're at right now with our plan moving forward. So,
I would just add, this is a situation which Pam has really pushed me out of my comfort zone. It's been good. We've had, I don't think heated conversations, but conversations where we've challenged each other on this. I've got a very analytical approach to staffing, and I want us to be very, very tight with our staffing. And so she's really pushed me to understand that this is a unique group of employees. And you mentioned it, the nuances, the efficiencies that exist, the disruptions that could exist by completely throwing this out of whack, and the community aspect, I think, are things that she's really challenged me on. So I feel comfortable in the fact that we're staffing in a sense that, again, no one's got their feet kicked up and not doing anything during the day. They are absolutely working on interventions at school with kids, other ways in which are benefiting the schools. And if there's more sections, correct me if I'm wrong, we are adding FTE to those buildings to make sure that they're not going over 24.
Oh, yes. For example, Briarwood is at 31 sections for next year, and so we have two different schools that support Briarwood. one school supporting 4 sections and one school supporting 3 sections there. Multiple other schools as well.
Just so much discrepancy in our elementary schools in enrollment to make all of these pieces fit tightly and with a really tight staffing model is maybe impossible. I don't know, but we continue to look at it.
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind is, for the most part, our smaller schools do have many of our specialized programs because sometimes our special staff is also called on to support those programs and support those students in the classroom as well. And we really rely on that relationship they have with students to support them.
It's my perception, too, that a lot of our elementary enrollments are a moving target, and we've got a lot of schools that are growing and declining, and there's an ebb and flow in different locations as we move around. I was just talking yesterday about how quickly Deemer is growing in the south area and how we're changing some things just to meet the needs there. So I know it's a moving target, and it's probably always going to be.
I think the other thing to add that makes elementary and secondary a little bit different probably is, when you have an increased enrollment, you kind of add to different classrooms and kind of can shift things around. When we increase enrollment at a grade level and we move beyond those classroom guidelines, then we're adding a section. That just kind of, not every single time, but pretty consistently, we have to then add sections, and that just doesn't impact hiring for that grade level. Then we have to adjust our master schedule, and that adds another section for our specials teacher, and we have to be able to have the opportunity to do that and the flexibility.
I have a question, just so I can understand better. The 3 exceptions that you had on the very first slide, does that mean that at Tomahawk, there's the 3, the PE, art, and music, they are 0.8, but the librarian's 1.0?
Yes.
Do the 0.8 staff go somewhere else, or they're just?
They are just 0.8.
Total?
Yes, and so that would be the other piece of that. Since they are 0.8, I can't, and Tomahawk is a smaller school, I can't really utilize Tomahawk to support any other schools because not all of the staff is consistently the same, nor would they have time. So I utilize other small schools.
Is there a reason why those 3 are 0.8, but the librarian's 1.0?
Well, from what I remember. Sure. I think it happened when we used to have, a long time ago, some library aid support.
Okay.
And then we no longer had library aides. And we, I think that was when I think most schools became 1.0 library. Again, most schools already were, right? When you look at this list. So I remember that happening. So I think that's the difference and the why behind that.
Okay. And when someone's 1.0, you can't offer them a contract for less than that. And so, okay. But there wasn't thought of, or a need to increase the 0.8s to a 1.0 because the building size and, okay. But if they were increased to 1.0, could you then utilize them in other buildings? But I guess they'd only have 0.2 left over necessarily for somewhere else.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at where they're located, they could go
That's true, they're
support
close to some others. Okay.
1 or 2 sections somewhere, so. yeah.
So in the scenario you're describing, we are making adjustments for that because we're going to increase the size of Tomahawk with the new building and decrease the size of Briarwood. So that right there will help to, those are other issues that we're doing at a little higher level to adjust and help staffing out.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, when you look at, a master schedule and all the different, requirements we have with instructional minutes and that tier 1 time, tier 2 time that, those of you in the elementary world know what I'm talking about, with those consistent timeframes and the requirements we have with that to provide that instruction, you start adding 2 or 3 specials teachers to a schedule. Thank you, Nolan, for nodding and understanding.
Yeah, I'm at a building that utilizes specials for that, and it's a luxury, is how I'd phrase it, to be able to have that flexibility with the specialists, knowing, we have our specialists doing SEL lessons with kids in the mornings, helping support that. Some it's later in the day, or even having that ability to come in and do a reading workshop group, essentially is what that tier 2 we're talking about is. And meeting with those kids that just need a little extra push to get to where we need them to be. And our educational aides are amazing, do amazing work, but again, that's just another certified staff member that can come in and provide those potential interventions.
But when you get 2 or 3, music teachers, that you're really struggling then with consistency with scheduling for the different buildings that they're working with and being able to allot that core time in the master schedule.
Yeah.
And I know, again, kind of like you were saying earlier, that 8 to 8:30 time is nice because it gives the one that I know our specialists enjoy that extra little time to get ready. Like, all right, teacher, but stuff doesn't magically just appear ready to go. But they also do help with arrival, which I know, again, helps my principal out a lot. I do know kind of a potential hindrance to that, just in terms of the master schedule, is when it comes time to dismissal, we have our specials going until 3:10, and that can sometimes get just a little bit tricky with the master schedule.
At Rushton, our specials, we're a smaller building, and all of our specials have an ABCD schedule to support intervention. They still get their, allotted plan time and those things, but every one of them has, well, except for library, because we do share library with Westwood View, which is walking distance now, so. They do. They support, because we are a smaller building, we don't have as many instructional aides and ELL aides and those kind of things, so they do help in that capacity, which is awesome.
I also, and again, I hope I'm not speaking for my specialists without me asking, but I have not heard any negative feedback from specialists going in and providing those interventions. They seem to enjoy those times even at points.
I was going to say that we also use our specialists. This year, when I did not have an aide, they helped to cover a lot of that time. They also help when we have absences, without having sub-coverage, so it is very helpful to have that flexibility in their schedule. I can say I don't think there's one day that they are not covering, doing something during that extra time.
We utilize that too, and our principal is very cognizant to make sure it's not during their planned time, that it is still just during that extra section that they essentially, or not extra section, but that extra opening they have, that they'll help out with those coverages when we don't have a sub.
And I don't want to try to make some kind of general statement, but it seems like if it's a smaller school with, less than the 24, they're either going to be working themselves in the schedule in those ways, or they might be assigned to another building to support.
Or both.
Or both.
Right?
Okay.
So, yeah, you might have a smaller school that,
Next year, that's what it'll look like for us. They'll support another building, but then they'll also help with some interventions as well.
Okay.
any other questions that I can help to answer or clarify? Dr. Schumacher, anything else that I missed?
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good job.
It took me a while, don't worry.
Elementary colleagues for helping out. I see that someone to the left of me just has left, you just act like you're not even elementary at all anymore? I mean, okay. You're good, don't forget where you came from the elementary world.
I'm wondering if we need to look at our time and, discuss.
Is there any other information that we think we need before we start kind of diving into trying to like address or resolve these issues? I just want to make sure we're sort of at
Information-wise.
the informational section is what data and information. I know there was some things that, people said, well, I can't answer that sitting here today, but if there's anything major. I think we've sort of.
I feel like I'm going to challenge you guys to unpack the problem a little bit more on a couple of these. But I would also recommend that before you leave here today, can we tick through the 4 interest statements now and identify interest? Because I think it'll be hard to just pick up and do that next time.
Yep.
If we identify interest, we could pick up with solving next time. Maybe, right? We haven't done interest specifically.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and screen share, just to share the issue statement, and go ahead and type in what you guys tell me. Remember, the interest is, why do we care? Why do we have to, is it a problem? Is it the root problem, and why do we need to fix it together, is one thing. And the second thing you want to talk about interest for is, you need to make sure whatever solution you pick tries to meet most interest and not harm any if possible. Okay, so the first issue statement, how do we continue to support manageable workloads for SPED and secondary gen ed? Can I clarify that you don't really have specific problems that are new to secondary gen ed? You just listed secondary gen ed because it's in the MOU?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so then on this, now that we've unpacked the issue statement, or the, frame and focus here, do feel like this is the issue statement, this is a problem, and this is something that we have an interest on? If so, what's the interest?
The interest is I know we talked about retaining and recruiting staff, but as far as the gen ed staff, having the MOU with teaching 5 classes out of 7 has been positive, and I have an interest in continuing that.
Because why? But I guess you should say what
has helped with support in the building, for one, because you have 1 hour in your day that you're supporting students in a way that's not direct instruction.
What does that result in?
It's helped with workload to have 5 classes instead of 6.
So like you're describing a way that is addressing some interest, a way that you're addressing interest.
Okay.
I want you to get to the core of the interest.
Satisfaction, job satisfaction?
Okay.
Is that what you're, okay.
Okay, so is it teacher job satisfaction? What else?
A workload that's sustainable.
Because if it's not, what are the negatives?
I think we
Sorry,
lose
go ahead.
staff when it's not sustainable to other districts that might have a more sustainable workload.
Okay, so keeping teachers,
Yes.
okay?
I also think it builds into mental health when you're overworked or,
Burnout.
yeah,
So
burnout.
support positive mental health. What are the other reasons you need to figure out how to continue to work on workload for teachers? So turnover, keeping teachers in the district, teachers' job satisfaction, support positive mental health.
Student outcomes, because if you have a more manageable,
To do our job
There we
better.
go. Okay,
more manageable workload, you can give better feedback and
okay,
yeah,
okay.
plan.
If there are other interests that come up, we can scroll back up to that, but at least we can kind of capture that out there. Those are the no-brainer things in education. I just want to make sure we captured them and open the door for any other interest under why you need to continue to try to have manageable workloads.
I mean, I think what I've heard from the administrative perspective is that we just want to make sure, as we do this, it sounds like there's a need for a certain level of flexibility because of the complexities in building schedules at all the different levels. So just making sure that whatever solutions we have to this allow for sufficient flexibility to build master schedules, but also to make sure that we're being good stewards of public funds and spending resources in a responsible manner, right?
I think it's part of sustainability, unless we can get more specific. Isn't it
No, I
saying
would
we have
agree.
to do something we can keep doing, and we also need to be
Yeah.
flexible to change as needed?
Yeah.
So sustainability and flexibility, okay if I add that here?
Yeah.
And you could say sustainability is about affordability, right?
Yeah.
And don't forget, we always test everything: affordable, manageable, feasible, legal.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you. Just some clarity there on what sustainability means.
So you would include financially responsible and sustainable? Okay.
Anything else? We can come back and add to it. I'm going to move on to the next one. I think the next one, I used the same issue statement, but it was more looking at, yeah, actually, the first two were probably the same interest. The first two was support manageable workload for SPED, and it really centered around the specifics around paperwork days and caseload sizes. And so the interest there are probably the same as what we just now did, which was more centering around. Right, I think they're the same, right? I'm going to cut and copy.
Yes.
But there may be other interests in the other issues.
I'd say an interest is meeting student needs. Much of this depends upon the size of a school or the class requests at a secondary. The schedule drives our personnel and our teaching.
So meeting student needs is applicable to the first issue statement that talked about caseloads, right? Student needs are.
It's going to drive the caseload.
Right, certainly. So there's an interest there, right? And then you would say that student needs are present, but maybe in a slightly different way under the issue of crossover on teaching different certifications.
The course requests drive the preps.
Right. So that's student needs kind of desirability, right? Or what would you call that?
You could go that. Those requests drive those requests of what teachers are teaching. And in some cases, a teacher may be teaching 6, they may be compensated for it, or it might cause us to have more preps because of singletons. And so there's just
so meeting student needs is an interest because that's why it's happening.
The ability to meet
Right,
student
got
needs, yeah.
Okay, so ability to meet student needs. Anybody disagree with that? Okay, so I applied those in both places, thank you. Okay, now let's go and see if there's different interest under the last two, because I changed the issue statements. How do we appropriately compensate instructional coaches? I didn't do a lot of frame and focus here because it was in the PowerPoint you now have. Under interest, the PowerPoint had a lot of benefits of what the instructional coaches do, but the one thing I heard them say is the best level of professional learning is an interest. But what are the other interests on why you want to appropriately compensate instructional coaches? Doesn't say it's currently not appropriate, right? But there are an interest in doing it appropriately. So what are your other reasons?
Yeah.
So value of time, I saw that on their PowerPoint.
Being competitive with our neighbors.
So that you can recruit, retain?
So we can recruit and retain them.
What are the student impacts on?
Sounded like there was a lot of beginning of the school year stuff, like having iPads ready, it sounds like, I'm not sure what else in terms of, I think it's a trickle-down effect for the students.
Yeah, I would agree, trickle-down effect to the students because they're supporting first-year, second-year staff.
So the trickle-down support for students, and if they're supporting first and second-year staff, are they impacting retention with teachers that are not instructional coaches?
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be, yes.
Are there other? Again, I think anytime you're looking at something economic, you're thinking about sustainability. Student outcomes.
How are those compensated? Is it just those extra days, is it at the daily rate?
Yes.
She
That's
said
what
it
I
was
would
hourly.
assume.
There was an hourly equation.
Well, you mean in the other districts
Yes.
when they have additional days in there?
I'm just trying to, and we can look at their P&As and figure that out, but I didn't know if it was.
It's at their daily rate.
It's at their daily rate. Okay, so there's probably just a provision in their P&A that says for instructional coaches, their contract will be this length.
That's correct.
All right, let's see, there's one more to identify interest, then you may have time to look at some other things you want to do between now and ending, but okay, this is the one I really need help on because I don't understand what you guys are getting to. This is the one I said I need you to unpack the problem more. Maybe everybody gets it but me. I changed it to how do we ensure equity between specials teachers? Is it a workload equity issue or is this a pay equity issue associated with FTE status?
I think it'd probably be the first one, and I think maybe it's just education on what happens with specials teacher when they're in a building that's not at 24 sections, and what those schedules are, what's expected of them. There might be a perception that I'm in a school with a small number of sections, and I haven't been assigned to do as many additional things in my open sections as another building's special staff.
Okay, so you're saying that this may be an issue of clarity in education. I'm going to drop it into brainstorm ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, I just needed to clarify, this isn't any economic issue. Like if I'm not a 1, I don't make as much as someone that's a 0.5 or.
Well, I
You're a
mean,
one, you
if
make
you're
more.
if you're 0.5 FTE, you're going to be making half of a
Right,
salary.
but is it an equity issue that I want the opportunity to be a full-time or it's not? It's more like what I'm assigned to do?
I mean, if you want that opportunity, you can apply for.
Okay. It's more like what I'm assigned to do when I'm not full-time?
Well, so you are a full-time staff member, but in that building, you don't have as many sections to teach because the building's smaller.
And would the presentation you feel like help you all?
Yes.
Be more satisfied and maybe the specials teachers, that's where they might need the clarity?
Yes.
Then see if it still exists as a problem?
Yes.
So that one may be a real low-hanging fruit to solve, right?
Yeah.
So I did capture what ideas came up, and what do you guys want to do from here? You have about 14 minutes. I think you need to develop your agenda for next time. I'm guessing you're going to jump in here, but what else? And do you want to glance at what ideas are already out there so you can think of more before, or just pick this back up together on ideas?
Sorry, what did you say? I mean, I'd be happy to look at the MOU to see what needs to be updated, because I think that's one of the solutions
One of the
for-
solutions for those first two
Okay.
issues.
Well, the first issue was continue protected paperwork days was one idea. I
Yeah.
heard in the presentation it is going to be done.
Yeah.
And then the other brainstormed idea we had was a possible guidance document for principals. We can maybe revisit that when we come back. That was about the crossover teaching. Another idea that came up was, this is where I think you guys need to spend some time, the compensation on instructional coaches. That can come more towards economics, and there are possible ways to do it in that PowerPoint. The last on ideas was education and clarity. What about not being assigned a seminar day and SPED stipend? Those were
Those
in your
are
frame
both
and
things
focus.
for the MOU. Yep.
But you guys didn't really unpack a SPED stipend. You need to talk about it before you can.
Yeah.
I would want to look more at an MOU at
Okay.
the moment,
Okay.
Okay.
personally, but I mean, I don't think it's something that you,
So,
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead. So it feels as though you guys have had enough conversation that if Rachel and Jill looked at how to put some things in the MOU to bring back to see if it's,
as a possible solution. So, yeah, so we could start updating that MOU.
Do you ever do MOUs for more than a year?
Potentially, and I feel like, so I had added that MOU as a last day topic because I think that it makes sense for it to correspond with our negotiation cycle.
Okay.
At a minimum, but, yeah, I mean, we would need to go to the board and ask them about how comfortable they are committing out. As we all know, the state of finances in Kansas is continuously in flux. So it would be, you know, how comfortable are we continuing to commit to that? I know the intention and the desire is to continue it, and Jill is absolutely correct. Budgetary changes were made to provide an ability to continue doing it. So I think the language and the length of that is definitely something that that's something I would want to go back and talk, you know, get the board's feedback on that. I think with regard to instructional coaches, it probably makes sense that when we do our compensation presentation, that we ask Russ to provide us with financial information about what it would look like for our school district. I don't know how Dr. Gonzer got those numbers, if it was a rough estimate or
I think they're a pretty solid average of what our
Okay.
current instructional coaches would cost, but that would just be an average. Yeah, I agree with you. We would
We could have
want
Russ
us to,
solidify that and say, okay, if we added 5 days, if we added 7 days, if we added 10 days, and he could present that as part of his compensation presentation.
and just thinking down the road, it could be one of the lines on our, whatever, our calculator in our individual groups, right?
Yes,
We're
and-
willing to spend this amount.
And looking to the agenda, I would also probably ask him to present, just for information purposes, the cost to the retirement plan, if we did a retirement plan contribution for all teachers, just so that the compensation teams have that from their, hey, if we have all the money in the world, these are things we would like to spend them on, and have that number.
We haven't fully frame and focus that.
No,
Right.
we haven't.
Yeah, I haven't heard that come up. So on homework then, Jill and Rachel can work on draft language for the MOU, but it sounds like someone needs to check with Russ first about what was the commitment on resources? Financial, or?
That's for the third one, or no, the third one about instructional coaches.
Yeah.
Okay. So besides any other homework that needs to be done? And we didn't thumb anything, so I'm a little concerned. Are people clear about what changes they're going to work on?
So how many issue statements do we have now?
4. 2 of them are the same. 2 of them are the same issue statement, but one of them has a focus on paperwork days and caseload sizes for SPED. The other one has a focus on the crossover teachers at the middle school level, high school.
It's high school.
High school.
But I mean,
Okay, so that's the same issue statement, but 2 different focus. And then the last 2 you have is appropriate compensation for instructional coaches. Sounds like you'll meet with Russ, move it to economics. And then the last one, it sounds like maybe, you haven't thumbed it, but this equity around specials teachers is an education issue, which may be a real
Which
link.
I plan to link the presentations that we had,
So
that
those are the 4
were done
lines.
today in our joint statement, and they'll exist forever in our shared folder. So I think the work that Dr. Gonzer did and Pam Lewis did on those presentations, those are things that we can go back to, so that if we've got a principal working on some of those issues, we can go back to those presentations and, hey, this is how it's supposed to be, and we know that because we worked through this during this.
Yeah, and I have done that for previous things as
Awesome.
well, yeah.
I mean, the good news is it sounds like the issues the association brought forward, and really even some of the ideas, have already been on the district's radar in terms of the work being done on it. So you guys were closer, I think, on the issues than you realized, were you not? Because now it sounds like it's a matter of memorializing some of the stuff being done, and then checking out the cost on instructional coaches and doing some clarification and education around the specials.
Yes.
So we know that Rachel and Jill are going to bring back some homework for next time, but economics may not be picked up next time. But what else is left on your agenda for next time?
So we need to kind of, I think, if I'm right, Dr. Schumacher, there is still a question mark about whether Russ is going to have the information that he needs to even be able to do his presentation.
He's waiting on the legislation to do their thing. And then we are still waiting on the benefits renewal. We met with CBIZ yesterday, and they are going to try to get it to us soon.
And I don't know how that's going to play out with the special education funding. I mean,
Yeah, there's COLA, there's special
you got it,
education.
and Sherry mentioned just $144,000 out of her budget for the additional days for, the special education teachers to do their paperwork. The challenge is, we pull millions of dollars come out of the operating fund currently to support special education due to lack of funding. So we need to wait and I don't want to say wait and see, but I think there's some unknowns with regards to the legislature and SPED funding as well as COLA.
So what I would suggest we have for our May 9th meeting agenda is we're going to have to take a little bit of a wait and see approach, and I'll keep in communication with Jill as to what our May 8th board meeting looks like, and as to whether Russ is going to be able to do a presentation at the May 8th board meeting or not. I'm hopeful that he will. And if he can do that presentation, I would suggest that he then meet with this group as soon as possible, even if we're not ready, for our full compensation discussion, at least have him do his presentation and provide us with a copy of that. And then if not, I think we can just move our NEA-Shawnee Mission 7 and 8 that we had on the agenda today. Sorry, I think.
So can you say what those are?
Yeah, number 7 is talking about student cell phone usage in class, and I think that one is going to be a discussion. We talked about it a little bit, but I think that it's, and I look at my other team representatives, I don't think that we're seeking, there's the boxes at the top that you check.
Yes.
I think we're seeking a discussion and maybe some guidance to principals if you haven't already done that.
So that's more discussion based.
Yeah, and then NEASM leave.
So but on the
We
cell
talked a
phone
little bit
issue,
about that.
we're not going to be 5-step in the cell phone issue. It's going to be communication in this room to figure out.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, and then what was the next one?
Leave, I would like to do the 5-step on. It's NEA-Shawnee Mission 8.
What's the issue, how do we?
Thank you for asking.
By the way, I called this document workload and instructional coaches, Rachel and Jill, because all 4 of those are in one document. I'm emailing, if you need the notes.
Yes,
we need
please.
to- Okay.
How do we address the need to provide temporary leave that meets personal and family needs?
Gosh, why does it sound like something you really heavily unpacked last year? Am I thinking of?
I can't remember another.
I don't know that we talked about leave last year.
Okay, all right. I'm thinking of someplace else. So that will need to be 5-stepped.
Yes.
Okay. Those are the only 2 non-economics left?
No.
Okay.
And then we have one on aggressive student behaviors, which is something we've unpacked a couple of times.
In previous years, yes.
Yes, okay. And that one's from the district?
COVID leave,
It's
that's
from
what we
NEA.
talked about.
And then I will say, I know last time we did consensus on a few things. Our representatives are reaching out to the elementary certified staff for more feedback to see if the changes that we recommended are ratifiable. And so that's scheduled for May 17th, though, like the
That'll just be, it's later in our agenda. Like, I consider our agenda to be rolling, and we'll just
Rolling
kind of keep
agenda.
moving through it. And then if we want, I can start working offline on the MOU and updating it and sending it to you. And then we can see when we've got time to review that MOU. We do already have that on our agenda,
Right.
to review and look at that.
And the supplemental pay schedule subcommittee has stuff to share, and that was scheduled for
May
the 9th as well. The 9th's a 4.5
It's a really long
hour.
meeting.
Okay.
So-
We haven't, it's an all-day meeting, isn't it?
It's 12:30 to 5.
Okay. And then what about, were you drafting some final language on what you guys agreed upon on the,
Late resignation?
Yeah.
Yes, and I have that ready, and I think we can kind of, it might make sense to group our TAs together.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we've thought through everything, everyone's had a full opportunity to look at them, vet them, and so I've got them on our rolling agenda, and when we're ready, we'll kind of bring forward TAs that have to do with P&A language and maybe go through them all at one time.
so we have 3 more meetings scheduled?
Right now, we just have May 9th and May 17th, but we've got the last half day of school and May 24th and May 25th as possible dates.
What is the last half day of school?
May 23rd, which is a Tuesday.
So 23rd, 24th, and 25th are possibilities, the 9th, and then what's the one after the 9th, 16th? 16th and 17th?
Just the 17th.
17th. Okay.
And so.
I would put the cell phone conversation off until the end.
Okay.
Because it's something that doesn't have to happen in here if you don't get to it. Everything else has to happen in here, does it not?
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting it's not important, but, and then also, when we think about economics, when we do get to economics, we usually have spent a working, part of a meeting, you've broken out into your 3 groups. Remember, your 3 different groups do work a couple of hours in here. So whenever we do economics, we need it to be on a day that has the most hours available to us.
Yeah.
So,
And that's why we had put it for May 9th, but I will keep in communication with Jill. I'll let her know what the May 8th board meeting is going to look like. In the event that we are able to do our operating fund budget presentation at the May 8th meeting, I'll work with Jill to figure out what May 9th looks like. If we're not able to, then we'll just have to kind of push those compensation presentations till later, and we can just continue focusing on the association's remaining issues at our next meeting.
important to hammer those out before we move to economics, I think.
Yeah.
All righty. Does anyone have anything else?
So just making sure we don't leave these issues, all these workload issues today, like hanging out there that we talked about. Are we feeling like the work that we need to do on those to get that issue addressed is looking at that MOU and getting it updated, sharing the presentation that Pam Lewis did on specialists, and I'll try and be like very concise, but like a high-level summary too in the joint statement. Making sure we consider adding additional days for instructional coaches when we get to the compensation discussion. And then is there anything else that we need to do? I just don't want to leave anything of that hanging and us be like on our last negotiation day and, oh wait, we left that on the table and we didn't.
The only other note you had was in regards to the teachers that are teaching more than one, and it was instructional guide for principals, but it sounds like that's kind of a hammer on a small, right? It sounds like they're already talking one-on-one.
And I think I can emphasize that in the joint statement too, like this is how we do it, and there is that ability to have that conversation with your building principal if you are one of those individuals to have a problem-solving conversation.
The expectation is that they're doing that, okay. And that will probably solve that issue. Do people need to thumbs that and the communication on the specials, you can thumbs that they're not going to result in, right? You're done with those issues?
Once we get, okay.
Well, I just have a question. Do you think the MOU is going to address what's going on in the early childhood with the SPED issues? So I just want to make sure we've had a lot of early childhood people leave, special education and unified. So if you feel like that's going to address that issue, then I will give a thumbs up. But I cannot, because that's who I'm representing, give a thumbs up in good faith when that's who I'm here to represent.
And remind me specifically what's the concern with the unified pre-K specials teachers?
So unified pre-K, I think it's because, and I did check, they are not having only 10 SPED students. That is, I checked into that.
So we'll hold off on thumbing anything on the SPED stuff.
I think so. And also just making sure, so I think that there's just some inconsistency with the unified. So at the SMECAC building, they go 4 days. Unified goes 5, and they kind of are doing more than one job.
Okay.
So just,
I think I'm going to have to do some additional work with Sherry on that and figure out what we can do in terms of efforts on that, reflecting that in the MOU. But I would say that can be captured in the continued work that we do on the MOU. Like, we're not going to forget about unified pre-K when we go through provision 4 on the MOU. That will be something that we will look at, and as we are working with Sherry on that language.
and not just that, all of the special education of the early childhood. Is where I think we need to look.
Okay.
Okay, it's 3:02, sorry.
Yep.
Do you want to then maybe put that down on May 9th at all, or are we reviewing those later?
So I think potentially, I mean, we have a little bit of time between our next meeting, and so I would say that we could potentially, for the May 9th agenda, be looking at that updated MOU. It just depends if we can fit in compensation or not, and then how much time Jill and I, in addition to our regular job duties, and Sherry have time to work on that. But we can definitely seek your input as we're going through that and see what we can do in the MOU to not lose that specialized group.
So let's not consider anything thumbed today.
Yeah.
Because the special ed issue, and even the issue with the principals meeting one-on-one to work out any issues on the folks that are teaching crossover, whatever you call it, just so that people have time to think on that.
Yeah.
I don't want us to feel rushed and do thumbs last minute.
Yeah.
I have to go to Hiawatha, it's 3:03, I'm going to shut down.
All right, thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.